is so nice. For yes, we have new books we have tonight. Hello everyone, how are we doing? Ooh, that's close. Move that away from me a little bit. Just a tad. And I'm looking, well, well, I think I should go for a colour change. That looks for me. That does look more me. Oh, hang on. Give me a second. A little bit better. Yay, it's back working. I can see myself moving. And hopefully that works. Woohoo! We're working. Hello! I have 9 viewers at the moment. Thank you. I hope to get more. That'd be nice. I am sorry for the sort of disappearing for a second. But it was, for some, still on 60 frames per second, which tells you what I was recording and playing around with, getting ready to work on earlier. Yes, I've been working on a computer game recording. Yes, the UAD video is done. Yes, it's uploaded. Hopefully it works. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Calvin Gasberg. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Knight681. Hello, DH89. Hello, Angela Paul. Hello. Ooh. Last week I mentioned Nick Summers' book, and it appears that 2 new ships, according to the book's website, are the last 2 admirals converted in aircraft carriers, Fearless and Intrepid. The RN had even 2 of these ships. Yeah, the Italians are up the creek. And why, in the name of all things holy, would the Royal Navy rename their ships from the admirals' names? They wouldn't. Honestly, this is... I can see where they're coming from, because those are cool names to give aircraft carriers, those are. But no, they would have been, if they convert 2 of them, that would have been the one from probably Camel Airs, which I think we're working on that as an option anyway for a conversion of an Admiral class. And, honestly, the other Scottish one. That's the options I think about. Hello, DGB40. Hello, George Newman. Hello, Sage. Hello, Ian Winter. Hello, Bud Guy 8829. Hello, Colin Cameron. Hello. Ooh. Isaac everyone. In most law history, the Audacious class is locked at 4. What is stopping them from the number of Audacious being increased? The answer is the RN 10 Malta, but only the historic 4 get completed. The Implacable 14, with 10 for the RN and 2 each for the RN and RCN. Honestly, because someone has a weird fantasy life. Honestly, you're asking about things which are decisions made by the authors. And the Royal Navy only builds 2 Implacables before they move on to the Audacious. That's what they're moving on to. The Audacious are a stepping stone. I can see them churning out 10 Maltas, or wanting to churn out 10 Maltas. But I can also see them basically going 2 Implacables, boom, boom, built. Audacious, done, 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 4. And then moving up. I don't see them churning out a huge number of Implacables for no other reason when they've got a better design already ready to go. That's not looking at the way British yards are warming up. It's basically suggesting the yards are in. It's putting the yards in a sort of US model where that's the Essex swarm coming through, and the Implacables in the role of the Essex swarm, which would have fit if war had held off for that much longer. If the RN had had till 1942, that's probably what you would have get, an Implacable-esque swarm of carriers built. Because they'd try the armoured carriers, and then they'd be going for something which is a hybrid of an Ark Royal and an armoured carrier, which is, to an extent, what an Implacable class is. But that's if war doesn't happen. Andrew, question to start off with. This is based on something I spent 2 hours today on. Assuming the German fleet does not scuttle at Scarborough in 1919, the ships get handed out to after the Allies. Say goodbye to any kind of Washington Treaty. Hello, Vision. I'm at home with COVID. Ouch. Hello, J.O.F. I came with an equitable distribution that left Germany with 4 Helgolands and 1 Kaiser in their fleet, the older battleships being scrapped. In addition, Germany gets added to the Washington Naval Treaty in 1922 onwards, under proviso of being allowed to have 125,000 tons of battleships, with each ship limited to 25,000 tons and 350mm guns. How feasible and crazy is this? France would have an absolute nut over Germany being allowed anything. I'm actually adding them in. I have to admit, I am adding them into the London Treaty. I am saying in an equitable treaty they would be included. But I've adjusted the ratio as I've shown you before. I've discussed it, and as you know, I have France and Italy on 4, Japan on 7, and the US and the UK on 10, and I put Germany in at 2. But honestly, France is not going to be happy about that. France didn't want Germany to have anything. They didn't like them having the pre-dreads, but basically the British said, well, either they have pre-dreads or you're probably going to have to deal with the expanding Soviet Union on your doorstep. And the whole reason one of the reasons that France gets behind the creation of Poland is because that creates more space between, that creates space, which means that Germany doesn't have the justification of having to be heavily armed for dealing with the Soviet Union and what's coming. Coming you ready in an interview, the further adventures of HMS Enterprise. HMS Enterprise is frankly confusing me because I've run her for a few simulations now, and she does pretty well in all of them. I have no idea what I've done so right with that design. I had a take on in one video, in one simulation I've done on the Free Deutschland class, and she massacred them. It was not even funny to watch. I was sitting there going, well, this could be boom! One blew up in about first 3 salvos, one of the Deutschlands went sky high. And it was a case of, what just happened? It wasn't funny. It was quite scary to watch. And sitting there going, this would have been a pretty useful ship to have, Royal Navy. Upcoming Shromac, hello. DHNO, do you think the very grand name design for the Dreadnought class would have been better served on ships with a bigger public media profile like future large destroyers? Well, no. They need to have a certain status, those ships. Let's be honest. Aircraft carriers and ballistic missile submarines are your capital class ships. They are your capital class ships. Them, and I would argue LHDs, are your capital class ships, so they need capital class names. I have said on Twitter, my only worry is naming a ballistic missile submarine Warspite, because in the nicest way, no matter where you position a Warspite in the world, they always find a way to get into action and into trouble. And the one ship you do not want having a predilection for getting into action and getting into trouble is your ballistic missile submarine. I have great respect for HMS Warspite. I have great respect for the name and the crews that have served them. But Warspites have a habit of finding a war zone. And I don't want an SSBN which has that habit. So that's the only one I have a mild, not so much, it's a appropriate name for the level of ship in terms of its importance. And I like Warspite being used again. I want it to be used again. But given the history of the name and what our previous ships bearing its name got up to, I'm not so sure it's what I would give to that particular form of capital ship. I'd have been tempted to say we'll build a 3rd aircraft carrier, or maybe make the new Type 83s the Warspite class. There are options out there. That's right. If the British could, how many Audacious class would be ideally needed? If the British could, they need as many Maltas as they could get. Why do they need more Audacious class? Audacious are an in-between class, and they last as long as they do because the class which is supposed to be built after them don't come into service. If the Maltas had come into service, the Audaciouses would never have lasted as long as they did. especially if the Maltas had come into service in the sort of the early 1950s, probably alongside the daring classes. Hello, Mano6040. Hello, Dan Freeman. Hello, Yikas. Hello, Vision. Hello, George Newman. Ooh. Hello, Rick Vasala. Hello, GA Guy. Doc's Enderton has the speed of Lexington battlecruiser without the flaws. She has a lot of fun things. Andrew Paul, the distribution I came up with was UK gets 2 Koenigs and Bayern von Tan. Heimberg, US gets 2 Koenigs, Ben the Fillinger, and Japan gets Sedlitz. France gets 2 Kaisers, I suppose, and Italy gets 2 Kaisers a month. Honestly, the trouble is, and this is something the Royal Navy understood, but to an extent the US Navy would be less affected by, but, etc., is the Royal Navy didn't want the German ships because they would have been an extra logistics line to support. Even the Bayern, which is theoretically as similar to a Quinlan as we can get, is so fundamentally different, there is no continuity between the two classes in any way, shape, or form for them to work with. No, seriously, if the Iron got 10 Maltas, what time frame would most likely be for the procurement? If they're building 10 Maltas, the odds are they'll be procuring them from about they would be if war still ends in 1945 and they continue on with building them, then probably they'd have 10 in service by about 1960-ish, because they probably slow build them. Thank you, Sage. Hope your self-propelled musical chairs are proving enjoyable. But I can see, Andrew, why you're doing. You're being nice, but really, the only ones who really would have wanted German ships would have been the French, who do take some German ships and put them in service because they don't have the large force they need to support. And I think to an extent the Italians might have made use of them for similar reasons as the French. But honestly, the Americans wanted them because then they wouldn't have to build their own, but they wouldn't really work for them. And the Brits didn't want them because they had plenty of their own. You're talking about a navy which regularly went, hang on, we have another cruiser squadron? Seriously, there is a classic conversation in the Admiralty at one point, which is, the enemy are going here. And an admiral turns around and goes, oh, that's good, there's a cruiser squadron there. And the first Sea Lord turns around and goes, what cruiser squadron? It's these ships. They're cruisers? Yeah, they're town class. How many of these do we have? The admiral, the first Sea Lord in question, was Jellicoe's predecessor. Basically going, how many town class cruisers do we have? That was an honest question. Stream went down and came back. Thanks for some, but that Andrew Paul, yeah, that's a good working out the tonnage. But again, there's the reality of it in that, frankly, it was almost more helpful for them to sink themselves for most people involved. Listen, I stand by my video comment. It's the 3Fs. Firepower, fire control, and first hits. UAD seems to rule that everything. Which also makes sense, because let's be honest, in real life, that seems to be the thing that matters. Yeah, my Battle of the River Plate idea. It wasn't good for the Battle of the River Plate. I'm not sure. I have yet to manage to get Enterprise to be sunk with the threats I have put her against. I think I would have to have her totally outnumbered, and I've put her against two Bismarckish vessels, and she ran out of ammunition, so I called that over because she was still dancing ahead of them. They were damaged. Suffered. Yeah, I'm sorry about the stream going now. The stream went down for a second and then it came back up because when I started the stream, it was in 60 frames per second. And I know that causes lots of fun things to happen, so I had to take it off, restart everything, put it back in the 30 frames per second. I got the notice. Good, Stephen Richards, could Andrew Paul. So one can say that ship in Warspite find wars to spite and win. They certainly find wars, not always win, but they find wars. Stephen Richards, could the US pull the Wasp in early enough to get retrofit torpedo pistols before sending it to the Pacific? If they had enough warning, they could have. That's right. Aren't the German ships obsolete after World War I? Yeah, but you're talking again. Well, again for the Royal Navy and probably for the U.S. Navy, they're obsolete. But for the French Navy, let's be honest. Have you seen what the French Navy's building? Sorry, burn flashbacks. Oh, I would get over it. I would get over it. I would get over it. Oh, that shit. Oh. Burn flashbacks. Oh, caramba. Before anyone thinks burn, I'm talking about something that's burnt my skin, no. It's, if you haven't looked it up, the French aircraft carrier, B-E-A-R-N, burn. So disturbing. Actually, is there any good information on the air wing or the multi-class supposed to be? I think Jamie's done some research for his Armoured Carriers website. Got pretty good stuff there. Then the RN wouldn't have anything to fit for and not with the Type 83 in its name so gallantry. Potentially, but remember, it's not it's not tends to be the Navy which does it. It tends to be the Ministry of Defence because of the Treasury. And it's one of those things we have going around the world, and it's one of the interesting discussions we have, and certainly had in last week's bilge pumps, about the reality of the systems are now more expensive than the ships. The systems being fitted to the ships are more expensive than the ships. How many crews do we have? Yes. Hello, BCH. I said, do the Enterprise versus the German battle group. She took on Free Deutschland class. And won. Send US ships at the Enterprise. That's even crueler so far. The American ships are slower than the German ships. I suppose I could send an Ohio versus her, but that's not really fair. So I would still contend that what happened to the Wasp is an actual test of its torpedo protection. Arguably not. Danrin, I still think the French could have sabotaged the Kriegsmarine carrier aviation development by giving them the burn. They could have sabotaged so much by giving them the burn. My Secretary Front, will you upload the Free Deutschlands versus the Enterprise? I might add it into a UAD video at some point. Hello, Abazowski and Melody. Hello, everyone. Right then. So, I have 8 books next to me. They're all brand new, and they're like this. Brand new books. Jason, I think the oddest thing about your intro is basically an English gas coin. Well, it's what UAD allowed me to build. I wanted to build an all-forward arrangement, and I felt it should be allowed to build an all-forward arrangement. And they wouldn't let me. And it starts the whole debate as to whether or not the G3s were battle cruisers or fast battleships. And as I try to explain to people, they are battle cruisers in a world where the N3s, their equivalent battleships, are battleships. And that's really the point. When I see someone go, well, they're coefficient, they're far more heavily armoured than Vanguard, and they're far stronger. Yes, but look what their equivalent battleship was going to be. And let's be honest, if you want to do a good fight, you put an N3 versus Yamato, and you watch as it massacres it. The only thing Yamato can do is get away from there. Because if it gets into firing range, the N3 will outlast it armor-wise, and has the same firepower. It's not nice to watch. I've done some UAD simulations of that scenario, and it is kind of like going, oh, ouch! And if you're in control of the Yamato, and that's what I've done mostly, you tend to realise, hang on, what can I do to win this? Not much. And there's just not much you can do. Hey, Richards. Nice hearing, but Ryan from Major N calls the G3 fast battleships. They're certainly moving in that direction, but they're a battle cruiser in the world of the N3 battleships. And if you don't it's kind of like the Iowas. If you build the big super battleships, which the US Navy is planning on, then the Iowas do start to look very much like the battle cruiser in comparison. But we call them fast battleships. And yeah. It's a trouble. The problem you have, and it's like I'm approaching this a lot at the moment because of the video which I'm doing on the Galaxy class. The Galaxy class are exploration cruisers. That's pretty much what they're described as. So they have a cruiser level firepower as standard. I would argue almost a heavy cruiser level firepower as standard. But they have a lot of space which is taken up for exploration duties, labs, civilian accommodation, all those things. In wartime, especially during the Dominion Wars, and especially with some of the vessels which are brought out and built because they decided to save costs by only building 7 of the original 13, and they do seem to build more after that, but they built 7 of the original 13 with the other 6 being put into storage. All that space, which is for labs and other things, is instead transferred over to weapons and more military and power and all the other things they need to be able to even enhance processing for better sensors, which turn them into battle cruisers. They're still a cruiser, but they've gone from being an exploration cruiser, same hull, but the space has been reoriented around fighting to make it a battle cruiser. Which seems kind of sensible and realistic in spaceships to me. That is what we're talking about, because in peacetime you need the exploration cruiser. In wartime you need the battle cruiser. So when we're talking about battleships and battle cruisers and fast battleships, it's such a spectrum. And it's a contextual spectrum, because if you put, I don't know, an Iowa next to HMS Dreadnought. Iowa's a super battleship. She is. Dreadnought is what? Chopped liver? It's a Dreadnought age, but Dreadnought, by the time Iowa comes into existence, 40-odd years, 30 plus, 35 plus sort of years later, doesn't matter. She no longer has any relevance. So when you turn around and go, well, the next generation of ships which the RN was building post-World War I, this battlecruiser, it looks like a fast battleship. Well, that's lovely to say, but A, they had no concept of the fast battleship at that time, realistically. They had been sort of gunning for that with the Queen Elizabeth class, but then they hadn't put in the small tube boilers, so you can suggest it's come from that direction. But in many respects, they've started off with the G3s going for we want speed and we want firepower, and then armors being added in as a function of the design. They got a good armor layout, but that's a function of experience and design, which gives them a very capable thing, a very capable approach. But if you built both the G3s and the N3s, there would be no question in anyone's minds, that is the battlecruiser, not fast battleship, that is a battlecruiser. And that is a battleship, because the N3s would have started off the period where 18-inch becomes the standard de rigueur for battleships. Because the US Navy wouldn't have stopped there and gone, well, the Royal Navy's building 18-inch battleships, we're going to kit with 16. No, they'd have gone for 18-inch. And then the Japanese would have gone for 18-inch. And then some bright spark would have gone for 20-inch. Because, you know, you have to go bigger. And then some bright spark would have gone, I've got to jump that, and go for 21-inch. Or 22-inch. And you would probably eventually get some really bright spark try 24-inch. Or 600 and something millimeter. And that would be an absolutely terrible weapon which would probably destroy the ship that was firing it. But we'll leave that to one side. The point is, these ships are battle cruisers. That's what they're being designed as. Yes, if we look back retrospectively and compare them to ships which are built up post-treaty era and all this stuff, we can go, well, we think this is a fast battleship rather than... But that's us ascribing terms which are not at all relevant to the thought process of the time, backwards. That's us changing history to suit us. And I can understand where Battleship New Jersey is coming from. I can understand where they, I haven't seen the video, haven't had the discussion with them, but I can see where they're coming from in terms of the G3s being fast battleships. And I do agree, they are probably a step along the line which will lead to the fast battleship, but they are not fast battleships. They are battle cruisers in an N3 battleship world. And that's the reality. Well, N3 and G3 are considered Yamato now, just 20 years early. Yeah! So, right, what would the hours be if the USN built the Long Tanners? There's an argument they'd be battle cruisers. Listen, it's really simple as this. Is your armor belt proof against your own armament? If no, you're not a battleship. Listen, look at the Next Generation S7 final, Season 7 finale Galaxy. Yeah. They're hurting the Galaxy class has a nasty weak point called the neck. The Galaxy class has many nasty weak spots. Menacing slow, unarmored, under-armored cruisers. The main use of Dreadnought in World War II would be a slow cruiser, on mostly coastal defense. Dreadnought, if it was around in World War II, would be sitting in the Caribbean going, come to me Deutschland class. Probably would be upgraded with radar, etc., if they have it still around. Cameron, the interesting thing about the Next Generation era is that they have, and thanks to the Super Chat, they have the Defiant, but with more weapons and armor and ends up slower than the Galaxy class. So is she the battleship? That's an interesting case where, frankly, the Defiant, there's a reason I haven't added the Defiant into my cruiser yet. I might add her in as a bit of a thing at the end to talk about as a talking point, because she's slower at warp than a Galaxy class, but she's more powerful in in impulse. So, and certainly seems to be more maneuverable. So, there is part of me that wonders whether she's some form of well, I sort of thought I've been thinking about the final lot, and It's a real question. Battleship? No. Cruiser or frigate? As in Age of Sail frigate, Razé frigate. Does spring to mind. Because she's very tough. Did you read King George V's class battleships by Daniel Knowles? If yes, what's your opinion? I think I have, and I seem to remember it was good, but I'm not quite sure because I've read a lot of books by Daniel, I think, from memory. Why would 24-inch destroy the ship firing it? Because if you have 6 24-inch guns with that amount of caliber, the sheer size of ship you need, you'd probably end up with something on the size of the Incomparable, and you'd probably end up managing to split it in half. Seriously, a 24-inch shell, if you consider the sheer weight of shell, the amount of explosive they had to fire to launch it, and the metallurgy at the time in the 1920s and 30s, you'd have had to do a lot of them to make it to the level at which you could fire it from a ship, and actually the ship wouldn't actually break itself. And you have to remember, quite a lot of ships do break themselves in this era thanks to firing their own guns. Definitely, especially when Montana would have been built. 12 16-inch guns and 27 knots is a fast battleship. Yep. So if we lived in a world where battle cruisers were the mainstays of destroyers nowadays, how would things be better for naval diplomacy? I'm not sure they would be. They'd certainly be interesting, but they'd have to be a lot bigger. Sure, Mac. I'd never say. Sorry, the 16-inch and 18-inch were already ripping the deck planking and denting superstructures. Yeah, 24-inch would have been interesting. Shunshay, until someone outright insane wants a 31.5-inch jump in naval guns, please don't go there. Let's be honest, destroyer shouldn't be a nicer term, because cruiser sounds nice and friendly. Destroyer sounds like I'm going to hurt you, but destroyer, somehow, this is why I love some of the variations. Let's put it this way, like all things, political correct PC actually does have some good place in society. It has some good points which we should remember, and it's worthwhile. But there are some aspects of it which I do find quite humorous. And as said, the fact that cruiser is considered more politically incorrect, whereas destroyer isn't, is one of those. Because cruiser, it's considered politically incorrect, as I said, because of its imperial heritage, it seems to me. But destroyer sounds a lot... Let's be honest, if you were just hearing those words for the first time, cruiser, destroyer, which sounds more violent? Honestly, I'm surprised everything we're building these days isn't frigate. Because let's be honest, frigate sounds nice and happy and very friendly. Or maybe ship of the line and frigate. So line ship and frigate. Yeah. That could be it. Every ship bigger than a frigate is a line ship. It's an aircraft line ship. It's a missile line ship. Generally, Starfleet are the fastest of all the powers. They do like to go fast. Hello, Nook. Okay. Would all the US fast battleships be considered battle cruisers since their armor wasn't very good compared to their main guns? That's an interesting point to make. Andrew, Define is not a cruiser, she's a destroyer. You would not go cruising in her. Well, she does do exploration and scouting. And there is a very special type of cruiser which she does remind me of. Well, destroyer and / cruiser she does remind me of. The Royal Navy's large fleet destroyer, specifically. Let's be honest. Defiant does sort of fit the role of tribal class. Even has torpedoes to act as her big ship killer. LVSH. As an amateur historian, I'd like a professional's view. What makes a good historian and what makes a bad one? Thanks for the super chat. And the loaded question. Okay. So, I'm gonna say this. A good historian is someone who lets the history guide them and shares. Takes every effort to share the knowledge, share the lessons they learn from that history with as many people as they can. To me, that's a good historian. A bad historian is someone who goes to the history with a predetermined perspective and is merely looking for history to confirm that, and then tries to limit the audience of history, or does either of those things. I do not like people who try to be gatekeepers in the historical world. That tends to make me be upset. Because my view is my view is a lot of the trouble of history, and a lot of the problems that come from people's selective reading and misunderstandings of history, comes from the fact that history keeps getting politicized, and history's always going to be politicized. But the problem comes when people let one side take over the narrative. I will never, the amount of times I get told, I hear things like, well, that symbol's now been taken over by that group who are quite extreme, so the rest of us don't want to touch it. And I go, no, what you should be doing is going and taking that symbol and taking it back at them. And going, no, that's our symbol, because it's our history. If you let extremes of whatever political inclination take over something and mark it as their area of history, you've lost something. And you've forever given control of a part of your cultural narrative, of your cultural understanding, of your historical lessons to that extreme. So you don't do that. Don't let them take it. Don't let them win. You know, one of the things I often have discussions when I'm talking with class, especially about fascists and the rise of fascism in Italy and Spain and in Germany, is how they used Roman, especially Roman history. But specifically, they used Roman Republic history. The fasces, the sticks which they carried, which a consul or a magistrate or any of the elected rulers of Rome would have lictors carrying around these bundles of fasces with them as a symbol of their authority and their power. That was a symbol of order, but do you know what that was done? That was a symbol of building streets. That was what they used to lay out roads and measure out spaces for people, for the expansion of the city, for the expansion of things. It was an inclusive symbol. In that respect, it was built. It wasn't a symbol of power. It was a symbol of service. It was a symbol of their duty. So yes, it represents their authority, and yes, to an extent that means their power, but it also represents their service. And if you let one side take that over, you've lost that. You shouldn't lose that, because that's actually a good thing for everyone to remember. That they were carrying a symbol not just of power or authority, but of service. And that's something quite crucial. Right. Hope that answered that question. Stafford, if Dreadnought was transferred to Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, would she still be around today as a museum ship? Would they have fought for such things? She might well have done. If she survived World War II, she would have been old enough. Andrew Paul, anti-drone World War II would also make a decent convoy air escort. Potentially. Grace Elsie, defined as a monitor? Nah, she's far too powerful for that. The requirement there is a swarm of defiance, or perhaps a flotilla of defiance. You wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a flotilla of defiance? It's horrible, but if we substitute range in place of FDR light speed, defined as LCS, no. Richards, I voted for Stacey Abrams as president of Earth. Shomak, do your colleagues ever give you grief about talking about sci-fi ships in regards to these concepts? Because I find they're very helpful in illustrating these concepts. Yes, occasionally, but then I can give them grief back, because the thing is, and one of the benefits I have with my study and my knowledge is I can do this in the sci-fi ships, and I can do this in the regular ships as well. So, in the nicest way, I can win the argument either way. And I go, would you like me making that case in a nice journal article? No, because that would really cause you fun, so it's better I do it on video and use sci-fi ships. No, but I have fun. I like them. They're good colleagues, mostly. So anyway, I mean, a 21-inch gun could be used to launch torpedoes. Melissa, 1920s metallurgy. Yep, wasn't thinking about that. Yeah, 1920s metallurgy and a 24-inch gun. Yeah, bye-bye shit. It would work on land. They get it to work on land, and then they take it to sea on a ship. They build that battleship. It would fire a salvo. Bye-bye ship. Look at the Ace Combat 7's Alicorn had a 24-inch 128 caliber rail cannon, and she is a submarine aircraft carrier. Ouch! That's definitely some hand wavium going on there. Andrew, on a historical note related to a 24-inch gunship destroying itself, was it ever considered what sort of damage HMS Fury would take if she had both 18-inch guns fitted and fired simultaneously? This is one of the reasons why I don't think the 18-inch guns were designed for Furious. This is my point. I think they were adapted for Furious, but I think they were designed, and I think they were a slightly larger design for Agincourt. But we'll leave that to one side. Because that would explain so much about the 18-inch gun and its history. Another South American naval arms and infrastructure race starts in 1929. What ships get built, and how does it affect the London Treaty when they develop domestic battleship production? Oh, that's going to cause fun. That would cause fun, because the US would have to respond, because they want to be the big power in America. So the US in the Americas. So the US would have to be building new ships. So yeah, it would basically cause a lot more construction. Guy, the Stalin and the novel Iron Man had 24-inch guns. That would be interesting to watch. A Soviet ship. Susan, would the escalating size race in an end-free world eventually hit a resource wall? At some point, every navy would either smarten up or Yamamoto handcuff themselves. There are only two navies which could theoretically keep it going, which would be the US and the Royal Navy. And that would be as long as Congress wanted it, because Britain would never back down under those scenarios. And especially as between US and Britain, it wouldn't be a mass volume building race. Both would be building in probably about 3 or 4 ships per cycle. So it would be a case of, oh, you built those 4 ships. Well, we've built these 4 ships. So you built for those 4 ships. And when I say per cycle, I mean every 3-4 years. So the British economy could quite easily sustain while paying off the debt and doing all the stuff that's wanted an extra, building a new capital ship each year. It would be a case of they would keep it up as long as the Americans did, and probably one cycle afterwards. That's why frigate and corvette need to be used. They sound so nice, yes. Frigate is at least as a bird, so it sounds friendly. It does. We could also have a puffin. That could be the name for the patrol ships. Instead of patrol ships, they could be all puffins. Frigates, corvettes, sloops, all sound lovely, yes. Cruiser sounds like cruise ship. I assume that they called everything destroyed to make it easier for Congress to appropriate funds. That could hurt them in the end. Vision. The only PC folks that think cruiser is more offensive than destroyer exist within the Admiralty and the Foreign Office. Unfortunately, no, they don't exist in those places. 80cm guns on a ship. Can we talk of rate of fire? Yeah, it would be interesting. Tribal class in a Starfleet would be great, although they did jump straight to D, so Daring class? That would be interesting. I would have always thought Defiant, Daring, Devious, Diamond would have been a good set of names for them. Vision. In the 1950s-60s, the USN adopted frigate as a ship bigger than destroyer but smaller than cruisers. They were interesting times. Going on, the PC story I always remember is Labour taking down a portrait of a prince and putting up one of the Cromwell, or prince and putting up one of Cromwell in the Foreign Office. The first meeting was with Ireland, thus attending 2 countries at once. Yes, that's the thing. For the forgettable princes are so easy to have paintings of. They look illustrious, but they don't call from. But how much of a immune zone does a ship need against its own guns to be considered a battleship versus a battlecruiser? Basically, it's supposed to be able to take the first hit. Its own guns. You can never design. Basically, if a ship gets hit once in a spot, its armor is supposed to be able to stop that from its own equivalent of its own guns. If it gets hit a second time, there is no amount of armor that's going to stop the thing. That's the entire basis of the 6-inch versus the 8-inch debate. Because when people go, oh, well, you know, the 6-inch will never penetrate that armor. And you go, the 6-inch isn't supposed to penetrate that armor. It's going to smash, hit all that area, and once it's hit it once, that's going to loosen bolts and damage the metallurgy and do all sorts of things to the arm plate. And then maybe it hits a second time. That might get through, but you can guarantee the third time will get through, and that's why you have that volume of fire going up. Dear Shana, enjoyed your video on Elsbeta. My wife is Romanian and I was in Transylvania recently. Met a historian there who said they weren't too happy with the Type 22s they bought. They're good ships, but honestly, they bought old ships and they knew what they were getting. This is the trouble. When you buy a ship which has been good and been used a lot by the Navy, which has had it previously, you're going to inherit problems. This is the trouble with second-hand ships. It's automatically buyer beware. They're warships. They've been used. So good historians don't cherry-pick the evidence, is what you're saying, Dr. Clarke. Yeah. Why did the RN claim tonnage in the treaties? Oh, many reasons. Basically, the RN wanted a lot of value for things. They wanted overall tonnage, really. Consider Buddhists are really happy about some of their religious symbol. Yeah. And Dan Freeman, did the historian mutter something about things not being the same since the fall of the Western Roman Empire? it was certainly interesting when that fell. Thanks, Stafford. VCH, great point on the symbols of service. It reminds me of the black robe in US history. They showed authority, yes, but it came in great service. And it was supposed to make everyone look the same. It was kind of a uniform without it being a uniform of office. New Akira 4002. How long would the metallurgy take to catch up for a 24-inch gun to be able to fire without destroying the ship it's mounted on? A lot of investment, but probably a while. Ugly Steve, hello. HMS Richmond Agincourt, full broadside of 12-inch guns, made another Royal Navy ship to come believe she'd been battle cruisered like Queen Mary. How many gun to split a ship? 24-inch gun. I would say, nicest way, if she had a 24-inch gun and 8-gun broadside, that would probably do enough damage on the metallurgy in the 1920s and 30s. Frigate bird, you say? You're thinking. You realise that's the only time a nuclear armed ballistic missiles have been launched, right? A Soviet ship with Soviet metallurgy. I want a video of it firing a full servo and Soviet dignitaries wondering why a new ship spontaneously disassembled itself. It would have been interesting. So, what is the smallest ship you could get a Schwer Gustav 31.5-inch gun on? Maybe it's monitors. It depends. If you want to mount it in a turret, that's going to be fairly big. But if you want to mount it so that you fire along the length of the ship and you have to point the ship to be able to fire it, maybe with slight angulation, but basically you're relying on the length of the ship. Probably Arafusa class size could do. As long as it basically, once you start putting that sort of size gun in an actual turret, then you need a far bigger ship. Hi, Jack Ray. Andrew, can it be said that one of the reasons cruisers these days get called destroyers can be traced back to a good part of the post-World War II USN cruisers effectively being destroyer leaders? To an extent. And DLs were classified as cruisers as well, yeah. Could I lower the gain on my mic a bit? Let's see. Oh, that goes down. Is the sound better, by the way? How's the sound been getting better? Because I was hoping I managed to cure some of the issues. Hopefully that's better. Let's see. Vision, the issue with Starfleet is, before Defiant, the only small ships we see are the Oberth science vessels. Perhaps Starfleet is like the USN, with being mostly a big warship Tico Arleigh Burke Navy. That wouldn't surprise me, because they probably... I've often wondered if... Because some of the members of Starfleet have their own defense forces. And I do wonder if Starfleet mainly has the bigger vessels needed for operations, and therefore they don't have the smaller full fleet. Starfleet don't seem to have a full fleet organization. For example, carriers. There are some appearing in the games and various other things, but a carrier is something I would have expected a major Starfleet, a major spacefaring race to have. Especially a load of fighters. Justin, used warships have been used. Canada gives side-eye in our polar class. They have. If you think if something's been commissioned and in service for a decade, and then you buy and you think, I'm getting a new ship, well then you've been sold something by a used car dealer. What's that line from the movie? Yeah. Would I buy a car from him? No. But do I trust him on this particular point? Yes. I think that's called. I think that's called The Big Short. Yeah, that's from The Big Short. Yeah, I've greatly enjoyed the Aubrey Martin Montorin novels. Are you a fan at all? Yeah, I've read some of them. I tended to prefer Drinkwater, but I did enjoy the Aubrey ones as well. Dean Richards, NATO commitments, the KGVs are retained. How do you refit them so they last until the 80s? If I'm retaining KGVs, I'm probably retaining Vanguard as well. If I'm retaining KGVs and Vanguards, then to refit to the 80s, honestly, I don't need much. I probably mothball them most of the time. But I'm probably maintaining a battle fleet of 3 to 4 ships, because do I retain King George V herself? That's arguable. Prince of Wales is gone. Duke of York, I can possibly retain how Geoffrey and how they're both do Anson and Howe, so I would keep Anson and Howe, definitely Vanguard, so that's at least 3, probably Duke of York. King George V, if I keep that, that's going to be expensive. But how would I retain them? Well, I'd keep them in service. If I get to the 80s, I might well delete C, the X turret, the aft turret, replace that with some sort of hangar and helicopter system for putting helicopters in, and also put in some missile systems. Probably replace some of the 4.5-inch mounts, etc. Some of the 5.25-inch mounts, etc. But probably keep a fair number of those as well, because they'd be useful as secondary. Might even have her upgraded, have Sea Dart at certain points. She could probably have enough power generation. Depends how much work I want to do. Do I want to retain something with gas power? Do I want to completely revamp her engines? I might do that, but the question is going to be is how much do I want to do and how much is necessary? Why am I retaining her? So the reason I could be retaining them is the Soviet Union builds battleships. That's the arguable reason I'd retain battleships in service. In which case, if the Soviet Union builds battleships, then the odds are actually I don't retain them that long, and I build new battleships myself. That's the reality. If the Soviet Union builds battleships, then Maltas probably get built, and brand new battleships get built. And that's the only real reason I can see for justifying King George V being retained. Unless the Soviets just build 1 or 2 battleships. And they have deliberately weak guns. That's a question. That's an idea. What I do to them depends on the reason they're retained. So I think if an refuser fires a 31.5-inch broadside does a canoe roll, I was thinking more it mounted center line, and to fire, basically you have it firing forward. Or you could even have it firing aft. That might actually be sensible to have it firing aft with the bow forward, so basically its stern's pointed towards the target, and when it fires, boom, it can go moving through the water with the bow. How's that sound? Or you have it the other way around, and then you have the propeller shafts propellers go into high gear and power, and you just go to try and counteract the blast. Richards, okay, yeah. But guys, how do you assume the defense class doesn't need to fire 57mm missiles before it starts to break out apart, since they are developing cracks in the hull as big as 6 inches? Yeah, they're not good in rough seas. Have not been any out of the spike pops. I was going to jinx it by saying anything, but since you asked, good. In the window, Starfleet, you see scouts and destroyers in New Star Trek, which is a classic time frame. Also, you see fighter shells in the Discovery. Yeah, that actually was a good addition. I liked fighters being added to them. Wasn't a carrier fighter developed for the Dominion War? Well, fighters were certainly appeared in the Dominion War, but no one mentioned whether there was a carrier for them, and that would have been the sensible thing. Geoguide. Starfleet had fighters in the novel Dreadnought and in the Starfleet Battles strategy game in the early 80s. They did, and they also had in Starfleet Commander Gold. Starfleet Command, Gold Edition. They don't have fighters, but they certainly do have suicide and shuttles and missile shuttles. I still play that game. Vision. The LCS reminds me of the light monitor fiasco of the US Civil War. Last time you sent mass built at glass ships bound for scrapyard. LCS will get compromised and scrapped in the same ceremony. Commissioned and scrapped in the same ceremony. I don't think they'll. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting what happens to them. Does the fate of the Moscow reinforce the idea that naming a ship is a bad idea? No, the fate of the Moscow reinforces the idea that if you're going to actually pay to upgrade the ship, you should actually make sure it's upgraded. Not that the money goes into someone else's back pocket. I think the question is, what are the fighters for in Star Trek? The series seems to be more of an Age of Sail scenario. Starfleet controls the space lanes with frigates and vertebrates. To an extent, but if I was going to be patrolling asteroid belts where pirates would likely come out of, I would certainly want a fleet of fighters. Or at least a couple of squadrons of fighters to go do the hunting for me. Was it be fair to say that 1982 HMS Hermes, the last Central class life in Naran, was basically on the last legs? Well, considering she then goes and serves about another nearly 40 odd years with the Indian Navy, I doubt you could really class her being on her last legs. But she was certainly no longer a spring chicken. Vision. The Enterprise D is so huge and with so many hangars that we never see. Should be a carrier. I think most of the mass of the D in the Starfleet paperwork is banker boxes. Like, like Night Audit at my hotel. Did the LCS ships use the same metals as suspect Virginias? Nope. Hello, Richards. It's been a long road. Yeah? That was actually a good series. I actually liked that, although I did keep expecting him to look into the mirror and see a different face. That's showing my age, isn't it? D and the galaxy in general are designed to be able to carry a very large number of people in colony space and evacuation scenario. Yeah, that does help. And also, it's carry a large number of people in large number of supplies for a discovery mission, a sort of exploration mission. Hence, they're classified as exploration cruisers. Vision, rather than fighters, I think torpedo boats make more sense in stuff. Like HMS Vulcan, the fighter is the smallest ship you can get while having a big endurance. Why it replaces roundabouts in DS9. Yeah, and that's because the roundabouts were really designed to be too small in some regards. Karen, what camera did you end up getting for your trip? It hasn't arrived yet, but when it comes, and the reason it hasn't arrived yet is various things going through for the trip. And basically, I put the money into my account, pay for things. It's all sat there, ready to go, and it's covered something else at the moment because, well, to be honest, there is someone else going with me who I booked because he was away in America. Things fall. And once that's all sorted out, it goes. And it comes, and it'll be here. Let's see, where is it? But no, I've had fun times recently. But yeah, what we've decided on, again, the gentleman who's been traveling advice, who's been really helpful, and I'm looking forward to traveling again because he recently put up his Jersey trip, and you can see me in that, and that was a very fun trip, which is why I'm really looking forward to this one. But no, on Drax's advice, I've got a DJI Pocket 2 Creator coming, and which is a sort of stabilized camera. It's a 3-axis handheld gimbal stabilized sort of camera system, and it looks really good. I've got that. I've got a tripod coming. I've got various holders for the that camera coming, including a backpack mounting clip. And all in all, I've got sitting waiting to be ordered in my Amazon thing about £1,000 worth of stuff. So that's what I'm currently waiting for. But I'm being sensible with my accounts. I am being very, very careful in that I am making sure I've got everything in, then spending, and that sort of scenario. Because, how do I put this? It's weird. This is going to sound strange. It's weird from I'm so used to working in academia, where people and things don't pay you on time. So even though I know the people who I'm working with are going to pay me on time and etc. are going to do my, I can't get out of the academic mindset of don't spend the money until you're sure, because people might be late. So I'm keeping a buffer basically in my credit card, even though I don't need to, because of actually the generosity of all of you, especially Jack Ray. I'm going to mention that one because he's been so generous. And it's basically a case of me going the whole time going, yes, I know, and I know they will do that, and I know that, and I'm not worried about that. But I'm so used to, I'll give you an example just this year. 3 of the universities I work for have forgotten to pay me for a month at a time. And then all the pay's arrived, but the pay got delayed. And it's a case of you develop almost the habit of going, okay, fine, yeah, I'm not going to spend that money until I'm absolutely sure it's there. And it leaves you with a sort of... It's one of the reasons why I get into trouble sometimes, because I'm honest about this, but I think it's important to be honest. Being an academic is not a hard life. Do not get this wrong. I get paid to talk shit. I love it. But every life has its own stresses and strains. And being a junior academic, especially on contract work with universities, is not an easy life. Because when you're a PhD student, university has a certain responsibility to you. When you're a tenured member of staff, university has a certain responsibility to you. When you're an in-between, you're neither fish nor fowl. You're useful for the university, But you don't fit in either category. And you don't have the. I know there are unions and various other organisations which say they'll look after you, but they don't look after you the same way they look after tenured or they look after the PhD students. Because the PhD students have the students' union who look after them from that perspective. But you're no longer a PhD student, you're no longer a student. And the union, well, unions are supposed to look after you from the point of view of being staff, but you're not really staff. Because what staff are you? Because universities will do all sorts of things with you. They'll hire contract lecturers and administrative staff. They'll put you in the admin staff section and all those sort of things. And that's one of the reasons why your title and your job role, your title, and where you're put, and why you're not on the website, because you're not on the website because technically your staff, the email address, etc., you begin is for an admin role because you're paid through an admin system, or you put on temporary. Temporary is what they love. The amount of contracts I have which are TT, temporary. It's fun. So it puts you in a scenario where you go, this person is my friend, and I know they'll pay me on time because I know them, because they are such nice people and they are such hard work, and I have the money, and I could order it therefore now. But I can't actually press that button, if I'm being honest, because the part of me is going, but what? Because I'm still trying to. This is one of the things I try and explain sometimes. I have found working in YouTube so different to some of the other areas I work in, because you are all pretty darn nice. And it's adjusting to that, and it's adjusting myself to it. It's still taking a time. And that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to Canada trip. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to these things, because it's going to be nice to finally meet some of you and be able to say thank you to you in person for all you've given me. Anyway, that's enough of me waffling. But going, yeah, and some independence class can't go to C with a C state of 6 or greater. Can't see the independence class thing much longer than the freedom class. The independence class were the better ones, to be honest. But yeah, that's going to be an issue. Seneca Nero, the pitch for Star Trek is home plane and play space, so yes, it's an Age of Sail type scenario. Works. Vision, there is a good video on YouTube calculating and illustrating the internal volume of the Enterprise D. It's hard to see what that vast space is for, as D is not a dedicated mobile colony ship. Yeah, but is a dedicated flagship backup for every scenario ship. That's the thing. There are only a few of them built, so they are basically the biggest of the big cruisers. They're exploration cruisers. They're status ships going out for 5 years. But you have to think, considering the speed that they're converted to battle cruisers, that someone had that plan at least somewhere sitting on paper. Or the digital version of paper from the Star Trek world. Richards, you're going to keep going on with Stacey Abrams as the president of Whole Earth. It was quite fun. And honestly, there are people who are getting out of it going, well, you know, they shouldn't have brought in a person from the current time. But Star Trek's always done that occasionally. Star Trek's always had politics, and Star Trek's always been at the cutting edge of that. It goes hand in hand to an extent with the science in Star Trek. Honestly, I've often taken it as thought-provoking rather than anything else. Andrew Paul, free Hermes service in the Indian Ocean. She served for 3 decades, 1987 to 27, with her refits in 86 to 87, 93 to 4, and major refit in 2009 to 11, and another minor refit in 2013. It was said she could have been kept around till 23, 24 at the latest, at which point she would either be in need of full reconstruction or would have to be decommissioned. Makes sense. I'm not sure what conversation is going on between Knights of Code 1 and Dick Richards, but I've lost the beginning of it, so I have no idea what is going on. Nobody who designed NC 1701 cared about what the internal volume was when they doodled it. No, they were just thinking rule of cool. Derek, are you making sure to note the stuff that you can write off on taxes? No. What I do is I send all the receipts to my accountant who has to deal with that. This is another thing. Okay, look. In the UK, we have a PAYE system, pay-as-you-earn tax system, right? Because I have so many different forms of employers and so many different income streams, I literally send every year the Treasury, the HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue Customs Service, into a tailspin trying to figure out my PAYE. This has led to so many troubles, it's actually cheaper for me to employ an accountant. So I go to an accountant who actually specializes in academic incomes. Yeah, it's such a recurring problem. There's actually accountant firms who specialize in it. Very nice lady. And I send her my stuff. And she sorts it all out. And so far, every year I've been with her, I've had money back from the government. So I don't I don't worry about it. I just send her all the receipts and she figures it all out. All the receipts, all the incomes, all the costs. I pay the money when I need to pay it in January and July, and then I get the refund in April. Now, how likely is it US General Fords will have a similar class layout to the Nimitz? They're a generation differential, but there's probably going to be some similarities there. Sometimes an extra 24-inch by 12-inch by 10-inch wooden box might be helpful thing for your flight home. If I have one of those for the flight home for books, then the nicest way, that's getting boxed up nice and safely and is being sent home via DHL, because my experience of putting such things in airplane holds when it's being traveled as part of your regular luggage is it gets bashed up by the conveyor belt. I'll be posting it. But there again, that's also Drax's advice and Drax's plan, so I'll be copying him. And I will be shipping books home. Buffalo or the Canadian postal system seems to... there's a debate going on here. Which one's better? Because it took me a while to get over the trauma of being willing to spend money from being an income and not knowing if you have to pay a lot of money for tuition. I know, it's such a strange thing. And you have to be careful yourself, because you can sound... in your worry, because it's so ingrained in you, because you can sound almost rude to people, and you don't want to be rude. You're not being rude. You're not that. You are literally just so ingrained to worry about the money because it never comes in. And it's come to the point now where it sounds terrible to say, but YouTube is almost a more reliable income for me as a baseline income than any of the university jobs. Which is quite scary to admit when it's theoretically supposed to be my hobby. It's supposed to be the fun thing I do because I enjoy sharing history. And it's more reliable than the actual jobs I do day to day. Colin Cameron, academic politics, and that must be one of the reasons why my mum keeps doing a doctorate. Watching her work on them drives me potty, and she's now working on 6. That's always fun. PhD, but doing a PhD is lovely. I love doing PhD. And look, I've heard it said that the fights in academia are so vicious because real-world sex is so small. I think I've said that a few times because my professor used to tells me that on a regular basis. I recall on at least one case when the Enterprise relocated an entire colony. Colonists distilled moonshine in one of the cargo bays. Fun times. Cody85, thank you. Who is your least favorite Union General, and what are your thoughts on the Peninsula campaign? Union General pick pretty much any of the West Cavalry generals. They're all interesting people who should probably have not been allowed anywhere near a General Stars. And what are your thoughts on the Peninsula campaign? I love the lines of Torres Vedras, and every time I have ever been anywhere near them, I go and wander around them going, ooh. And the Peninsula campaign is a pretty interesting logistics-wise. There's a lot of the good naval logistics going on there, and it shows, I think, also what the Brits could have brought to the Finnish war if the Finns had actually used us. If the Swedes had used us, I mean. Pigeon, as a liberal, I prefer to see candidates elected in real life as opposed to on Star Trek. I wonder what planet Senator Ted Cruz would represent. Oh. I have discussed my politics. You all know my politics. I am, in the UK, broadly speaking, Conservative Party, and I agree with them more than I agree with the others, but I don't agree with everything they do by a long shot. And as I said before, my view on politics is that you should listen to you should never govern in ideology. You should look at the information, you could look at the evidence, and do what's best based on the evidence. But that is very old-fashioned, and it's in fact the original idea of the Conservative Party, which was regards conservatism, which was a reaction to liberalism, because the idea was that you shouldn't govern in ideology, you should always listen to reason, and do what the evidence suggests, and make small changes that over time build up to a big change, rather than try and make sweeping changes based on ideology, which you don't really have the evidence for. And yeah, that's really out of fashion in any political party. That's no more. I don't know if that's left, right, or what that is really these days. Frankly, would Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Antarctic Ocean fit the theme of our ocean class LHAs? To be honest, ocean class usually starts off with ocean, and then it's things like Sovereign of the Seas would come in, and sort of things like that, ocean-related but traditional capital ship names. Paul, have you read Howard Hastings' new book on Operation Pedestal? It's an interesting take on the utilization of heavy cruisers, as in air race resources. No one's sent me Max Hastings' book. And honestly, unless someone's, I'm not. Having read some of his books in the past, I will wait. If anyone wishes to send them to me, I will read it. But if I have, I'm not going to spend my own money on it. And my view on heavy cruisers is that if you don't understand what the heavy cruisers were for and what they were built for, don't comment on them. I predict you and Drac will charting a container ship for little books and stuff to do ship in the UK. Potentially. Shipping the stuff back from Canada in no way being undertaken aboard HMC had. Well, we have a ship's docked with us. Gee, guys, you're on. So, what was the deal with the torpedo battleship concept before World War One? No one really had it. The person who had it became obsessed with it was good old Beatty post World War One. But various nations looked at it, as it seemed to solve so many problems, until you realised that the range of torpedoes versus the range of big guns was such that it weren't going to work. Flattery, do you have an opinion on this historian, John Keegan? I think I've read some of his books, and I think they were quite good. It's one of those things. I've read a lot of books. Some historians... Okay, there are historians in this world who are pretty much guaranteed with books. We won't know whether I'm guaranteed or not until I've got to produce a second, third, and fourth book. That's when you can make a judgment about someone of whether they're a guaranteed good book. There are some people who either produce exceptional books or terrible books. if you notice, there are some historians who I concentrate on some books of, and some I don't. I completely ignore when I discuss one on this channel because that's what they do. There are some historians who produce one good book and don't produce any other, and then produce very few others. There are some who basically just write books and manage to get them sold, and no one knows really how. Someone must like them somewhere. Sure, I think he meant the American Civil War Peninsula Campaign. Also, Grierson was a pretty good cavalry officer, and Rosecrans and Thomas used their cavalry well. Rosecrans and Thomas used their cavalry well, but the cavalry generals were not good. Rosecrans was good. And in the Peninsula Campaign in the Civil War, yeah. There was a reason I read that as the Iberian Peninsula War Campaign. Let's see. For the American Civil War Peninsula Campaign, there's some interesting efforts around about the logistics and the various sort of amphibious operations they do. But how do I put this? There are times when you look at commanders getting they're fighting the battles in their head, not the battles in front of them. And the American Civil War's Peninsula Campaign is a good example of commanders fighting a battle in their head where the enemy is far more insurmountable than the actual battle in front of them. Where are the Fluffies at a line or Fluffies of war? It's raining today, so they are basically sitting inside going, we might both be water dogs. One of us might even have Welsh blood, but we are not going out there. Honestly, I kid you not, that I have a photo of it on the Ring camera somewhere. The poodle. This is the Fluffy research assistant. Saw it was raining, turned round, backed out the door, so his front half was still inside the house, and then lifted his leg up on the pop just outside the door, very happily, done, and came straight back in. Never actually stuck his head or anything outside the door. Many UK conservatives get pegged as a flaming socialist liberal in the US. Both Boris and Joe want to build that. It's one of the interesting things I always find funny, because in the UK, National Health Service is basically taken as de rigueur and is pretty much supported in the nicest way. If you were suggesting anything different, that would be a good way to commit electoral suicide. And yet in the US, it's terrible. Why do we not consider the fact that HMS Invincible and Federal Marion and Hood wouldn't explode if fatal shells have been duds? Because that would upset a lot of the predetermination of history. It's nice way. It's like if you don't. One of the things, the predetermination of battlecruiser being bad, battleship good, fast battleship in best. Only works if you ignore the fact that the RN's response to Jutland, etc., was to build the Admirals and then the G3s, and the N3s were going to be third-class constructed post-Jutland. When, if battlecruisers were so bad, then surely the Royal Navy would have been turning around and building emergency battleships. If you don't understand something, don't comment on it. Where is this radical idea come from? Don't misunderstand this as how it works. I know it's a problem. I usually tell people to go away and do some research. Oh, Zebedee, yeah, little dogs do like to. I've decided little dogs have a certain level of cannibalism for their owners in them. FDR had a lot of Republicans in the administration because they agreed on foreign policy. Yep. That's right. What I was saying is it was a good idea and it nearly worked. Grant also did an attack in the Peninsula in '64, but unfortunately that was under the command of another knucklehead. Yeah, Chinman, agree on Hastings. He has some contradictory takes. He trashed the British Army Model 2 for being sluggish, yet no army took more ground for fewer loss of life, and loss of life Max claims to care about. Richards, have you read Clausewitz? In many versions. I used to teach Clausewitz. I started off with Clausewitz, then I went to Mahan and Corbett. And I'd carry on from there. And I would go through pretty much every single period's theorist right up until we get to the modern era. And there are some interesting people. How about public school? For example, I would put a guy called Armstrong as a bit of a theorist, but he would claim he's just a historian. But say from his work, he gives a good approach to naval strategy and naval theory. And if you haven't read the books by B.J. Armstrong, you are missing out. Stefan, I'm hoping it's not the same storm crossing the entire Atlantic and going from here to Canada. Paul, Mark Zerling's book on Dieppe details the attempt to get a heavy cruiser for gunfire support. He believes the refusal doomed the attack. Honestly, there are a lot of things which we needed to make Dieppe work, but honestly, the trouble is, again, there aren't enough heavy cruisers going around. This is a legacy of the treaties. So, let's start off with some books. Dan Freeman, have you read Clausewitz in the original Klingon? Don't joke, there is actually a version of Clausewitz which has been translated to Klingon. I'm not sure if it's ever been published, but I have read the introduction of it with the help of a Klingon to English dictionary, because my Klingon is not that advanced enough to be able to read it at that depth. But it did have an interesting slant on it. So, Britain and Rome, Caesar to Claudius, the explosion of Renaissance fraud by P.G. Ogram. Now, this was a interesting idea. This is a book which basically says that, guess what? What we know about Britain is Britain wasn't as backward as we might like to think before the Romans arrived, especially when they consider how large an army they were able to field and what the trouble they were able to put up against the Romans. Prodigious ambition was patiently advantageous, but finance to match was fundamental to Caesar's political success in Rome. As a result, increasing insurmountable debt played a crucial role in Caesar's rise to power and its invasion of Britain. On his return from exile after Sulla's death, Caesar's captivating oratory marked him out to potential patrons. However, his capture and ransom by Sicilian pirates in 74 BC should have forewarned future creditors of Caesar's ruthlessness. Self-serving populist credentials. Velleius reports that his ransom of 50 tons of gold was paid by the cities of Asia and was a poorly received levy. Moreover, it was a damning indictment of the procurator, governor of their province, Marcus Junsus, and the Rome's inability to combat piracy. Despite the ransom having being raised from pecunia publica, public funds, Caesar operated as a private citizen when he retrieved the money and murdered his former captors before returning the ransom money to the people of Miletus. From this episode, a pervasive Roman maxim arose from a speech made by Caesar to the Bithynians. One cannot abandon one's clients without earning their greatest infamy. Caesar's populist pedigree, exquisite oratory, and somewhat maverick approach secured him a military tribuneship and the beginnings of a political career. Caesar's political ascendancy was remarkably quick and belied his own financial means. By 69 BC, he was elected as quaestor, treasury official in Spain, and by 63 BC, he had won the office of Pontifex Maximus, the highest-ranking priesthood in Rome. In 61 BC, he became governor of Spain, and a year later reached the predominant position of the joint consul of the Republic with Marcus Bibulus. Unremarkable, there were allegations of bribery, fraud, and embezzlement, which tainted Caesar's election, as did the involvement of Marcus Licinius Crassus and Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. Caesar's extraordinary rise from the relative obscurity to joint consul of a republic in less than a decade was evidently no less extraordinary to his contemporaries than it appears today. The resulted heated political environment, amidst accusations that his appointment was achieved through the misappropriation of funds, arguably initiated Caesar's diversionary campaigns in Gaul. Caesar's astounding ambition and cynical lobbying of his two central creditors became evident when he returned from his governorship of Hispania, before his replacement had even arrived. The reason for his return was ostensibly to receive a triumph for Hispania's victories. However, his haste suggests that his intention was to run for consul in the approaching elections. Caesar was initially barred from entering city walls because protocol forbade a general's entry amidst preparations for his triumph. Consequently, Caesar abandoned his triumphal preparations, entered the city, and sought out Crassus and Pompey, who were reportedly at variance. Plutarch recounts how Caesar cannily coordinated his patron support. By levelling your artillery against each other, you raised the Ciceros, the Catuli, and the Catus, who would be nothing if you were once real friends, and took care to act in concert. If that were the case, with your united interests and consuls, you might carry all before you. Suetonius saw Caesar's conspicuous carrying of the Crassus and Pompey as a self-serving reaction against the aristocracy, who had voted to assign him mere woods and pastures as the newly elected consul. Allegedly, it was this slight on Caesar which made him seek an alliance with Pompey, who was at odds with the Senate because of its tardiness in ratifying his acts after his victory over King Mithrates. Caesar solidified the alliance by sanctioning the marriage of his otherwise engaged daughter to Pompey in 59 BC. Caesar similarly convinced his super-rich patron Crassus to halt hostilities against Pompey and join him in a powerful alliance against all others. The resulting triumphant saw that no step should be taken in public affairs which did not suit any one of the three. Caesar's dogged and dutiful dedication to the triumvirate saw him all but ignore his co-consul Marcus Bibulus. Suetonius equips that acts were done in the consulship of Julius and Caesar, rather than Bibulus and Caesar. Despite this, Plutarch confirms Caesar's continuing popularity, writing that he acquitted himself in his office with great honour, gaining command of armies and the province of Gaul. Crassus and Pompey, on the other hand, were seen by the populace as powerful parasites who share the rest between them at their leisure. Such was the perception and predominance of these three intertwined, powerful, jealous, ambitious, and self-absorbed individual who found that the invincible triumvirate, which ruined the Senate and people of Rome, for selfish gain alone. It's an interesting book, and it's a good read. It's Britain and Rome by P.J. O'Gorman, and it's worth reading. Bom bom. Okay. Pigeon, what upset me about US politics is separate visits to Kiev by Dem and GOP House and Senate delegations. A bipartisan visit would look much better, showing united support for Ukraine. Yeah, but bipartisanism dies a death every time there's an election going on. I don't know why, but well, I do know why, because they want to look different so that people will vote for them and they can make a difference out of... well, it's one of the things you do notice is that sometimes, especially when you're dealing with international relations, the positions are actually very, very similar. But they make a mountain out of the mountains, out of the moleholes of hills difference. Molehills difference. It's absurd. Sorry. Someone's very urgently tweeting me, and I'm just going, why do you keep making my phone flash up? What's up? Anyway. Anything big going on? Anything important? No, it looks like they just want my attention. I'll deal with them later. Apparently it's hitting Merlin 64 as well, so it might be doing a supercell event. Or most likely free small spawns. We'll hope it's free. Anak, we finally have clear skies in Maryland after 2 days of rain. Fun times. W. Swordsman. Everything World War II for the navies were the legacy of the treaties. Every decision the world's navies made post 1922 is a reaction of the treaties. There is a case you can certainly make for that. To turn it around the other way, any American politician would find it hard to get elected in the UK for being too openly religious. I'm honestly not sure which parties they'd stand for. I was going to say, I don't know which parties they'd stand for. I don't know where they'd fit. The Dems might fit in, to an extent, in the Conservative Party. But in many ways, the Democrats would fit probably between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, not between Labour and the Conservatives, Labour and Lib Dems. And I don't know where the Republicans would fit. In terms of social policy, in terms of economic policy, that's where things get more interesting. Where's the snacks, Doc? You honestly think I don't have snacks? I have an entire pack of cookies here. But more importantly, I have Iron Brew. Paul, regarding heavy cruisers, using a heavy cruiser as 800 men in purely anti-aircraft, like they seem to have self and meant, role seems waste. But they weren't there as purely anti-aircraft. You have to remember, the Italians have a large force of heavy cruisers. They're very capable. So the thing is, you have to take a heavy cruiser with you just in case Italian heavy cruisers appear. And if Italian heavy cruisers don't appear, then, you just use it in an AA role. But the thing is, you don't know if the Italian heavy cruisers are going to appear or not. You don't. The Royal Navy can't go, well, you know what? The Italians haven't, the heavy cruisers haven't come out the last 2 times, so this time we won't bother sending our heavy cruisers because all they're doing is the AA role, and that's a pointless waste for them. And then, this time the Italians turn out with a force of heavy cruisers. Oh, sugar. That's the problem for the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy has to send their ships just in case, which can look pointless if you're going, well, this threat never materialized. But you're presuming the Royal Navy knows the threat's not going to materialize. And the Royal Navy has no 100% guarantee, and the convoys need to get through. They can't afford the convoys not to get through. So you can't afford to not send the protection. It's kind of like the Arctic convoys. Whenever you do, if you consider the Arctic convoys, the couple of times when they didn't send the things because they went, we haven't any problems, we can do it and we can run this risk. That was when the massive problems happened. PQ-17, etc. So, no. Don't take the risks. Guy, the Celts were good at fighting other Celts. No, well. So anyway, what would the US do if during the treaty period some South American nation was building a ship that we would now see as a Ford-class CVN? Panic. I think everyone in the world would panic. You consider the amounts of... basically, it would be the equivalent of a Wakanda appearing today, and the world suddenly realizing Wakanda is real. It would be a case of, oh my sugar! That's the level of technological difference you're talking to build a Ford class of 1920s versus what they were building in the 1920s. Acerbic Aircon, even EU ships can be a problem if they were mothballed before the kinks worked out, especially if they're mothballed before all the kinks worked out, because you might not even know the kinks exist yet. And there are various ideas about whether the invasion was an invitation of the Roman clients or... Yeah, there are some issues there. US historians view the impression of US citizens in the Royal Navy during the Republic War as the main cause of the War of 1812. I'm sure it's a factor in the war. Would I be right in the US citizens blowing up the Royal Navy ship there on an attempt to get the iron to stop oppressing US citizens? Very stupid idea. Yeah, and they weren't really as many as sometimes they try and make out. And also there's an issue in that some of the people... There's a problem when you've got groups who both speak English and who sound so similar. Yeah, I'm American. Are you sure? You sound like you've come from Southampton. So we're calling you English, and there's all sorts of issues. So, yeah. And if you consider... Yeah, blowing up a ship is actually not a sensible thing, because you'll blow yourself up. And that's the trouble. Some of the people who claim to be US civilians were... It was debatable as to whether they were or weren't. Especially, there are issues with the standards of today. So no, Lib Dems, Republicans in the UK. Lib Dems are Liberal Democrats. They're a sort of party which sort of sits in the middle between Conservatives and Labour Party, and they used to be far bigger. But basically, Britain's always been a sort of roughly two-party system with lots of little parties. And what happened was the major left-wing parties switched from being the Labour Party, from the Liberals, to the Socialists, to Labour. And even Labour, I'm not trying to call Socialist these days. Simrich, how do you class the Klingon Vorcha class of starship? The Vorchas are interesting. Let's see. Before I start on the next book. Technically, it's supposed to be a cruiser, but... Well... They call them attack cruisers. And I would probably put them in that sort of line of positioning. What did you call those? Probably battle cruisers, honestly. That's more in line what they are. But they call them attack cruisers. They've appeared 28 times, apparently, in Enterprise in Star Trek. And it's been around a long while for them. Which, again, doesn't surprise me, because the lovely people that are the... oh, what do you call them? The Klingons are not exactly going to waste something. If it's a good design, they're going to keep going and iterating on it, rather than building a whole new revolutionary. And they're not... They're too often at war to be able to go revolutionary. Iterative and evolutionary design makes far more sense of them. Wouldn't it be better for the sorry subclass of county with your connects are in it? It'd be better to build a lot more proper counties, yes. We will leave the minefield of politics, please. I do realize I wandered into it, but I wandered into it trying to explain things and with stuff about historians. What is the SS Normandy in Mass Effects 2 and 3? I'm not honestly sure. However, I do have another book for you. I haven't seen Mass Effect 2 and 3. It's this one. Pirate Queens. The Lives of Anne Bonny and Mary Read by Rebecca Alexandra Simon. Now, again, I do express the fact that anyone who has Alex in Alexander or Alexandra in their name does tend to be a sign of good quality. And this is quite an interesting book. Okay. When it was offered to me as a book to review, I thought, well, I'll get it, because it's either going to be very good or it's going to be not good. And there are parts of it which are certainly not really my style of how I would phrase it. But there again, I'm another historian. And if we all phrase things the exact same, there would be not much point in us all being there. So the point is, even the bits where I'm not sure I would agree with the phraseology were good, because they made me think about what phraseology and how I describe it, which is what I want from a history book. And this was very thought-provoking for me in thinking about the reality of piracy and the reality of the pirate times, but also the comparison of the reality with the media, especially the modern media and the modern, I would say, Netflix, etc. sort of series, Amazon Netflix series about the pirate queens. It's worthwhile reading. The life of the pirate averaged just 2 years, unless they were fortunate to retire or somehow leave the profession. The Royal Navy increased its power in the first 2 decades of the 18th century. More and more former privateers, legally sanctioned mercenaries, charged to rob enemy ships under the contract of letter of marque, called letter of marque, even pirates themselves, were taking jobs as pirates hunters. Pirates were captured en masse, which guaranteed them death by public hanging in a crowded arena. The 1720s were the riskiest years to be a pirate. So why would 2 women, who had almost no prospects at sea and were confined to strict social roles, take the plunge into an uncertainty of this life, knowing that their capture meant certain death? The answer is quite simple. Pirates were seen as agents of social mobility during a time in which it was nearly impossible to improve one's position in society. If a person was born poor, they would stay poor, and so would future generations. Likewise, if one was born into wealth status, that would also be inherited. Pirates, however, came from all social classes with various levels of education. Their ships were independent, egalitarian societies, where they could vote on their captains and benefit from equal distribution of wealth, unlike naval and merchant ships. This allowed many to become quite wealthy, or at least financially comfortable, if they survived their career as a pirate. They were not beholden to specific countries and governments and considered themselves to be their own sovereign nations. Pirates actively rebelled against the rigid social norms by blaspheming, swearing, cursing, drinking excessively, and partying, robbery, and entering into violent encounters without fear of death. This type of life would seem free to anyone desperate to relieve the chains of their own situation. It's an interesting book, and it's a good one to read. Pirate Queens. Richards, no. I'm not, and they're not. I know there are various things which go out there, but can we all agree? And this is something I have discussed in there is something. They are not. Never, ever accuse your opponent of being antichrist or anything like that. Startles, it overstates their power, but no. There's no need to. Keep the politics and the religion, and keep making sure the two never meet. Because every time you have politics and religion getting together, that is when you have trouble. To quote Elizabeth I, I would not open windows into men's souls. And that's the point. You care about what people do when they're in office, the duties they hold. Do not try and ascribe things to their souls or anything like that. And one of the first things, and this was something which was made very clear to me in my own time as a councillor. We were all there because we wanted to do the best for our local area. Yeah, there is always one or two who, frankly, you're sitting there going, But the vast majority from all sides are there to do the best for the local area and try and deliver what they can for the local area, and will work together to do so. They'll have different perspectives and different starting points, but together we can actually provide something which is fairly good. But you can't do that. You can't do sensible government. You can't do sensible anything if you start off by saying one side are all evil or all stupid or whatever you want to do. You cannot do that. You have to sort of keep to the point of, I don't care if you're going to insult me or anything, I'm going to keep this to debating the merits of the case and arguing the ideas with you. Because that's the only sensible way to work. And the point is, if you are so short of ideas that the only way you can win an argument with your political opponent is by slagging them off or resorting to religion or any of the other things like that, then you shouldn't be in politics because you don't have the brains for the job. And that's my personal view, and that's probably going to get me into trouble. Turns out, if the Japanese discovered the Americans had bugged their naval treaty and stormed out and not returned until after the Kanto earthquake, how much better would a cruisers have been? There would have been a lot of fighting over it. If they'd stormed out, it would have changed the scenario completely, because the British would presume they bugged them as well. At which point the British would have treated it, been very upset. And honestly, by the time they came back, they knew the US political position would have changed. They wouldn't want to fund things, and honestly, the trial system would probably collapse. Fun fact about Lexus. The most famous land pirate, Berta, in Hungary was Rosa Sandor. Literally, Alex Rose. Good. Okay, didn't one of the pirate queens try to cheat the hangman by getting pregnant? If it worked, that's a good idea. But let's be honest, being pregnant in that period was not exactly a safe pastime either. So yeah, some view the attack on Mirza Kabir as the UK backstabbing the French by trying to Copenhagen the French. Apparently, the British reason is inexcusable. But how should we view it? It is the British Copenhagening the French. And it's simple. It is the nicest way is the British don't trust Hitler, and the British don't trust the French to keep the ships from Hitler. So it should be viewed as a nasty decision to make, but it should also be viewed as something which they do because they're not in a position to fight. Let's put it this way. The British cannot afford the French fleet to fall into German hands. The British don't want to sink the French fleet, but they would rather do whatever damage they have to stop that fleet being useful to the Germans than trust the French, because the French had been supposed to be fighting alongside them, and the French had just declared peace. And the British were carrying on alone. And the British gave what they felt was a fair options, and Darlan equivocates basically the French admiral is pointless. And as such, that happens. But honestly, I would say the French shouldn't have doubted the British willingness to do it. And if Darlan had exercised the might of authority or had actually passed on the proper options the British gave, the French might well have taken one of them, especially the Caribbean one. Because the Caribbean would have been a sensible thing. But yeah, an ugly reality of war. Next book. More Lives Than a Ship's Cat. More Lives Than a Ship's Cat. Quick answer to John South. To be honest, the main reason the ships are too long, the French are determined to prove the British overacted. It helps, therefore. And Richards, what you said about politics was completely correct, Doctor, but do we have any politicians who fit the description you just gave? I'm not sure about Canada. I'm not sure about America. In the UK, I've met a couple in Labour Party. I've met a couple in the Conservatives, and I've met a couple in the Lib Dems, but they are very few and far between. And I'm not going to name them because I know that it's their sort of death to admit to say such things about people these days. Because you're all supposed to be partisan, repeating whatever thing you're supposed to say. So, More Lives Than a Ship's Cat. The most highly decorated midshipman in the Second World War. G.A. Mickstone, MBE, DSc, RN by Jeremy Stoke. G.A. Mick Stoke, MBE, DSc by Jeremy Stoke. Now, this is a book. The description of this book is what interests me. The book is dedicated to my father, Paymaster Lieutenant G.A. Mick Stoke, MBE, DSc, RN, and my mother, Doreen Stoke, near Poven, who would together provide a family of 3 brothers with love and support in our early years, encouraging us as young men to take all opportunities with both hands, and enduring values that stood us all in good stead throughout our lives. Now, this is the list of chapters, and this is why I think a lot of you are going to enjoy and want to read this book. More Lives Than a Ship's Cat. Right, Royal Navy College, Dartmouth, 8 weeks training and off to war. Torpedoed in HMS Glasgow, first experience of the war. A young naval officer in the Western Desert. The siege of Tobruk begins, 10th April 1941. Most decorated midshipman in the Navy. HMS Queen Elizabeth, escaped from torpedoes again. Malta convoys, MF3, MF4, and MF5. Malta convoy MG1 and the Second Battle of Sirte. Return to England and sub-lieutenant exams. Operation Torch, the retaking of North Africa. Turned tide in North Africa. Operation Avalanche, the Salerno landings. Torpedoed in HMS Hardy on the Russian convoy JW-56. D-Day landings in HMS Kempenfelt, Juno Beach. India, Marriage, and now the Pacific. So, yeah, this gentleman survived being torpedoed once, twice, 3 times. He is the HMS Eskimo of midshipmen. So I think actually there are a few of you probably thinking, Paymaster, why would you be recognized as a resort? This is going to be interesting. I have read it. I have really found it interesting. I have found it very, very fun, enjoyable to read, and I highly recommend it. So, Icon, Mod, what's the alternative chat room for the Doctor's live stream? Is it through YouTube membership? Thanks. There's a Discord chat stuff going on there. But I have to say I don't monitor that while doing live because I'm doing everything on the laptop, and the laptop cannot run Discord at the same time as running the YouTube stuff. Sure, the French admiral should have been tried for criminal negligence in each death of that battle. If you're going to pass this issue on someone else, it's your duty to inform them completely. Yep. John South, at uni, I once got very drunk with the late Charlie Kennedy. He was a good one. So again, the doc's responding to chat conversation other than here. Well, I've got everyone's chat on here, so I don't think I'm responding to anyone other than here. So if you can't see everyone, I'm not sure why. John South, when I was in the Navy, we had the theory of the indestructible midshipman that may be the root of the legend. This guy sound. I would say if anyone's going to have an indestructible midshipman legend, it's probably going to be Mr. Stoke here. So, when did the sub-lieutenant come about? I know there was a lieutenant at the age of sail, and you went from midshipman to lieutenant without going over sub-lieutenant. They added the new ranks in Victoria. They did. When they stopped having first, second, third, fourth, fifth lieutenant, they added in sub-lieutenants because they needed more. Basically, once they needed lieutenants, and they had lieutenant commanders, and they had more ships, and you had the sort of. Basically, you needed the sub-lieutenant rank because you couldn't have you needed more than just a few lieutenants. You had more officers. How would the British get Hood and one or more sisters past Washington entry? If the British had more than one Hood, and let's say if they had two Hoods, they probably. Honestly, if they have them, then it becomes an issue for what's going to happen. At that point, the US probably needs to go. We'll probably go. We need equivalency. But it's. The thing is, the British wouldn't let them go if they had them. The US knew they weren't going to get rid of Hood. But if you have three of them, that's not a white elephant or a single occasional capability. That's a consistent capability. Because as I said, one is a white elephant. Two is a capability when it's available. Three is availability. Four is actual complete capability. Because you usually have two operational. Because of the needs of maintenance, refit, repair, transit, training, upgrading, all those things. Basically means that if you have three ships, two will be sort of not really available. You'll be down to one, really, as being available capability. Two, you usually have one available, but sometimes you'll have none available. So basically, it's three or more to have a consistent. And there's a reason why ballistic missile submarines, we always have four of them to guarantee it. So yeah, if you have. Basically, the British, you probably lose Tiger. There is no way the British can retain hold of Tiger and have Hood, let's say Rodney, and Howe, and Renana and Pulse, and Tiger. But 5 would be probably what they'd aim for, because that would give them a consistent hit. Would they get the nail rods? That becomes the question. Would they get the 68 ships, or would they have to forego that to keep the full force? And they might not, because the British would still insist on them, and that's the thing. The Americans didn't want to give them nail rods. The Americans didn't want. They had to, because the British were basically going, "We'll walk away if we don't get this." And the Americans knew from their own incepts that's what they were doing. Almost to an extent, sometimes I wonder if the British figured out the Americans were doing that and they played it. It could be because I'm running behind in the chat sometimes. I'm caught up with the chat now, but it's not always I catch up with the chat. Sometimes I'm running behind with the chat. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Checking it, yeah. Just I think I'm running behind in the chat. No, I think I'm running behind. Richards, that's what I think I'm doing. And also, occasionally I do skip sections of the chat where I cannot see the beginning and the end. It's like if there's a debate going on between people, and sometimes I just skip it because if I haven't seen the beginning, I have no idea what's happening in the middle, and I'm not jumping into the end. Tough. In the UK, if you start your officer training before your uni degree, you're a midshipman. If you do it after uni, you start as a sub-lieutenant. Not quite. That was one. There was a period when it was like that, but it's not like that to this day today. I'm looking at live chat, and that's what I tend to watch. Their sci-fi chat questions were mostly back at the beginning. Civic Icon, they were mostly back right at the beginning. Sure, US might demand to be able to finish the Lexington's battle cruisers. Potentially. I don't think 2 or 3 RNA sail ships sailing sunk by US sailor subs enough to make the island rethink the press gang of US citizens' practices. They probably don't know. That is the other trouble. If you blow up a ship with you on board it, who's going to know you did it? They're probably going to presume it's got sunk in a storm. Unless you do it in the middle of harbour, in which case they'll probably blow up quite a large chunk of the fleet as well. But they tend to have these things are guarded as well, so you're going to have to get to the powder room and get in there. So again, they're so far back, YouTube is not letting me see that far back. That's cruel of YouTube. Nope, there's no other chat. The only chat I have is that I have the live chat on YouTube. I have occasionally, and I have got plans at some point to start doing the Facebook chat properly again, but I tried doing it. But doing it, and it's kind of like doing Twitch as well as YouTube. They're all nicely possible, but they're not possible with this poor laptop. This poor laptop does everything, and I'll show you my little Aspire 5. It's lovely. It was this is one of the reasons why I say it's some sort of Acer Aspire 5. It's a nice little sort of laptop here. That's what runs everything for me. And you all remember, probably some of you remember that a while back my laptop went completely, my old Dell died on me. And I was trying to fix it. And Clarke gave me this. And this is one of the reasons why I say it's so strange for me to be, for me, YouTubers, because the people in YouTube are just so different than academia. And why I say it's funny, because I know, when I was talking about earlier, sort of, I know that will come because of who it's coming from and what that's. But I still don't spend the money because of the years of experience with academia, with constantly living on the thing of the money will fall, or the money you can't count on the money until it actually arrives in your account, no matter what institution you're dealing with. So it's it's a different world in YouTube. Thank you, Sarah Gagum. Thank you for becoming a supporter. Customers, what is your metric for similar material when grading? What percentage? Hmm. If you're talking about plagiarism, I tend to go. I tend to look at the individual account and individual system. If we're talking about similarity between students, I know which students as a group work together. And as long as it doesn't cross the boundaries of actual plagiarism, i.e. them using word for word the same paragraphs, I will tend to try and figure out a way to get it through. But don't pass it on to my students because I make them live in fear of the plagiarisms. Mainly because the universities I work for are pretty strict on those things, because most universities have to be. Plagiarism, and if they're allowing it to go through, is one of the few things that make a university lose its degree awarding powers. So they get worried about it. Andrew, if the iron free animals in the 1930s, with the iron dukes going to be going to scrapyard and 1 or 2 R's, also renowned, becoming a training ship posted on the Navy, does that mean the admirals and all rounds get modernised before the Queen Elizabeth? Do we end up with 3 oldish battle cruisers come World War II? Honestly, if you have... It would probably be actually one of the R-class battleships would go to become a training ship. And renown, and honestly, it... modernization-wise, you'd probably do... If you've got that bigger class of battle cruisers, they'd be the first ones you modernize and improve. Because you're replacing the battleships. So you've got the most space to upgrade and improve a battle cruiser. Especially if you consider if you add in the power requirements to maintain the speed. So it might well be that we ended up with 5 upgraded battle cruisers instead of 4 upgraded battleships and a battle cruiser upgraded. Because that's what we did end up with. Or I might reverse it. It might be 4 battle cruisers and 1 battleship upgraded. Sure, my God, these bureaucrats are ungrateful. I gave them a raise and now they're embezzling more money. What are you doing? Hello, that's the short. Nice round. Wouldn't there be a major backlash against the USA if these sailors had deliberately destroyed iron ships and killed a lot of iron sailors? If they found it out, there could be a backlash, yes. Sure. I mean, plagiarism can have interesting issues if your essay's on a fixed topic. There are only so many ways you can say some things. That's why I tend to structure my essays in a way which allows people to be differential. For example, the engineering one I like to do, and this is what I like to set to my first year history of engineering, right? They have 1 essay they have to do at the end of the year for me. That's their only assessment for the entire for that entire module. Because I say there is no word limit. You can pick any combination of engineers or whatever from your field from history you want. You have to analyze their careers and explain what lessons you think they offer engineers or whatever your field is of this day. And you have to pick at least 2, but I don't mind. You can pick as many as you like. And it causes fun. You can pick any two or any combination of engineers from history. The only thing I have banned now is I've banned Tesla and Musk. Because I got so many essays about Tesla and Musk that I was actually having to do comparative marking. Because so many people were producing the same pair. So I had to ban Tesla and Musk. But otherwise, they could pick whatever they liked. Whoever they liked as their inspirations. And they could talk about them. And I didn't care. Some of them picked one of their engineers would be one of their parents, and another one. And I go, well, that's fine. Then what you do, if you're going to do your parent, you have to handle this like you would do handling an interview source. You have to go and record an interview with them where you would ask them all these questions. You then have to type it up and stick it as an appendix in the back of the essay. So, and then you refer to that as your source. You refer to that type 1, and you have to make sure that's signed by them as being accurate. And that sort of thing. And that's such a fun essay to do, mark. And honestly, the reason I do it for first years is because mostly what I'm teaching them, and this is what I often try and explain to people, is yes, I'm teaching history of engineering and I'm teaching them the historical skills, but I'm also teaching them academic skills, referencing, how to write long works, all these preparation stuff, which actually stuff they don't really use again until they get to the dissertation. And this is why I don't put in a word limit, because the whole point is this is supposed to be preparation for the long works, for the dissertation. I get some really good. I had a really cool one on Rick Rover a few years ago, which was Rick Rover and a British nuclear engineer, and it was just really, really good. See, I'm going for a fun theoretical question. If Stargate was a real thing, how would you go about equipping an off-world seagoing navy? It would depend what they were, but submarines would be the first thing I'd be looking at. And something with it's what can I get through to them? Can I get systems through to them? And can I build the holes there? That's the issue. But there are options. Or alternatively, I would make sure I had a really large Daedalus class, and I would basically use that to drop ships. I think another. And report, plagiarism tends to be something all students have to be careful of. Speaking as a student myself, an institution I know lost a degree awarding authority of plagiarism refused me almost back. Yep, we're all watching like the. Good luck, Sean. That sounds complicated. That sounds like you're going to give yourself a lot of trouble. John South, I'd love to see Brunel and Stevenson. They are a good pair. They've been done a couple of times by various students, and they love it. Especially when I tell them to go down to because I mainly did this through King's University, and I go, well, you can go to Brunel's tunnel there underneath the Thames. You can go to his tunnel underneath Box Hill. You can go to Stevenson's this, that, and the other. Stevenson's the various things and wander around, and they're going, Wiking Aldous, yes. And there is a great thing constructed by Brunel, which is it's a road over a canal over a railway, from memory. Yeah, road, canal, railway. So the canal flows over the railway still goes underneath it to this day, and the road goes over the top. And it's just a brilliant piece of engineering construction. Survived 2 world wars, has been around for. It's still good to this day. Question: given Ghana's large size, how big could their military be? It's their population size that's going to affect the size of your military, not the size of your nation, the size of your population, and the age of your population. But they could be afford to be a little bigger. Sorry, Mac, trying to expand and manage expanding bureaucracy and centralizing state without dying of corruption. Centralization will get you every time. Unless you've got very good control of it, it's always going to get you. I'm struggling to see who I should fail based on their copy materials percentage. It is breaking me. Okay. In the nicest way, there's a program called Turnitin. that we usually that most universities tend to use variations of, and it checks their percentages of similarities. And I, as a rule, go and look at it and go, I don't care about the percentage. I look whether it's green, yellow, or red, and then I look if it's referenced. And I will tend to, if it's, I will tend to work on line of, is it improperly referenced or is it not? Is it not referenced? If it's not referenced and it's copied from somewhere, then that's in trouble. That's trouble time, because I know my students know how to reference, and I know they know the rules of plagiarism because I've taught them, and I teach them not once. I teach them 3 times across the year. So if they don't do it right, then they haven't paid attention, not just once, but 2 times and 3 times. And there are even videos on this channel about referencing and plagiarism for them to go and look at. So they have no excuse. But if it's yellow or green, I tend to not bother what the percentage is. I don't care at that point. If one of the things would turn in, which I have, which is, this might be the version of the universities I work with. Okay. But if the reference is the wrong side of the full stop, it marks it as red. Okay? So I teach all the students to stick it inside the full stop. Stick it in the sentence that they're talking about. Because otherwise, turn it in says it's wrong. It's not referenced. And this is with them doing it Harvard style, which is in brackets in text citations. Don't get me started on the various forms of Vancouver. That causes even more trouble for the Paul Turner-in, which basically just goes, I'm dying of death here. And it even has fun with Chicago, and frankly, Chicago is the easiest of all time. I love Chicago-style referencing. Basically, it's in the footnotes. Check them on the page. Fine, done. Also, another thing which turns up, and it makes it go red, is check if the student's dyslexic, because I had this myself when I went through bachelor's. I put in pages 73 to what was that? So 73 pages 73 to 83. Right? I wrote in. I meant 37 to 38. And when we went back and checked the book, that was what it was on. And a teacher was one of the lecturers was trying to get me basically saying I'd committed plagiarism and I was terrible because I got this reference wrong. And I just spun the numbers around. And that caused the head of the department to laugh their head off. Thankfully, the head of the department and my supervisor were slightly less worried about these things than my the module leader on that particular module was. But it happens, and you have to check it. And that's, in the end, you have to do it by case-by-case basis, because sometimes the percentages go, this one's 70% similar to another one. You go, really? So go, but it's all green. It's 70% similarity, but it's green. Okay, let's look at it. And it's all referenced. Okay, what have they done? Well, what they've done is they've put quotation marks and they've referenced it all properly. And that then becomes a different thing, because if they've referenced all but quotations, but the text is full of their entire work, instead of putting the words in putting in their own words, they have copied out large text from people. I then give them a low mark and say, in the nicest way, I cannot mark you for quoting other people. What I expect you to do, and as I've discussed in lecture many times, is you are supposed to put it in your own words and cite where you got the information. And tell me where you got the ideas from, but put it in your own words. Because I can give you marks for your own words. I cannot give you marks for quotes. So, sorry, that's going completely off topic, but that's what my advice. You can before 72. Can you build a railway through Stargate? That's an interesting question, which no one's ever really looked at, but theoretically you could, as long as you can make the incline and them line up fine. Yeah, you could put a railway through it. It could be quite interesting. I'm not sure how fast you want to make the trains come out, but yeah, you could do it. You need to make it so that the railway came up. And then it would have to come out and do. Ooh, that could be. Or could you get to have an incline and then have this bit be a raise up, so it comes up position, and this bit raises up as a sort of bridge section. Then the train goes along, comes out. You'd have to build it in first on both sides, but you could theoretically do it. Student topic: SpaceX versus Boeing. A study of successful and failed engineering cultures in corporate America. Actually, from 12% plagiarized to like 0.1 when the reference is added. Yeah, it can make it a big difference once you've got the references in properly and Turnitin is happy with them. Cool, Colin Cameron. Did a report on Brunel's photographer. Very cool, Seneca Nero. I put my own bachelor's features for a plagiarism checker. The only thing that popped up was a disclaimer I had put in front and I had to put it in. That's everyone. Does context matter in history? Because it apparently context doesn't always matter in history. Context always matters in history. Context and nuance always matter. If you eliminate the context and the nuance, you're eliminating all the color. I used to always sneak in a joke reference to my list of I had the other list of a real one. I had a bad habit of referencing papers written by Dolce and Gabbana. Terry Pratchett. Pretty much every essay I've ever written has had a Terry Pratchett book in the reference list. John Shea, it's absolutely like any other chat. I apologize for the slight interruption. However, there are still a few number of books to see. Yes, there are 5 sitting. There are 6 sitting next to me. Hang on, there are 5 sitting next to me because I've been through that one. I put that one down in the wrong pile. Thank you, there, Richards. Not sure. You can do it, but you would have to put an external energy source to keep it open longer than 38 minutes so you can line it up. Yeah, but you could probably do that without it, actually. You'd have to have a system which... How do I put this? You'd have to have what's called wheel catchers that guide wheels onto the rails. At the other side. I don't know, why do people want to accept in war you have to do dirty work no matter how unethical it is? Because there's this dream of a perfect war. No, wouldn't the initial burst of stuff when the Stargate connects to the railroad? That's why I said you'd have to have it sort of on a thing which would lower up and raise up. So you'd have to have it in a scenario where it would sort of drop down. Then you could have the initial blast out, come back, and then railway up. So, my prof might be somewhat confused why I would reference a history thesis in some random sentence in my thesis that just has to do with history, but I was ready to do it. Okay. Vision. The Old Erie Canal had several aqueducts over rivers. Basement Barge Canal has a bridge over the Genese River in Rochester. Anyway. Alistair MacLean's War. How the Royal Navy Shaped His Bestsellers. Written by Mark Simons, forward by Lee Child. Now, for those who don't know, but Alistair MacLean wrote a lot of novels. In 1941, he was called up for volunteering for the Royal Navy and served as an honorary seaman, able seaman, and leading torpedo operator. For the majority of his service, he was on HMS Royalist, a modified Dido-class light cruiser. Seeing action in the Arctic and operation against German battleship Tirpitz, he deployed to Mediterranean, taking part in Operation Dragon, and then went to the Indian Ocean with Royalist to fight the Japanese. He, of course, wrote HMS Ulysses and The Guns of Navarone and South by Java Head in 1955, 57, 58. It's not a whole life biography, but it's an interesting book in that this is how history shaped one of the people who shaped our culture. The first novels have had the impact of Alistair MacLean's HMS Ulysses, published by Collins in 1955. The book remarkably sold 250,000 copies in the hardback in the first 6 months. Oh, we can dream. A record at the time. It was after winning first prize, £100 in the Glasgow Herald short story competition, that MacLean came to the attention of Ian Chapman, who worked for publishers Collins in the Glasgow office. It was Ian's wife, Marjorie, who had been reduced to tears by the Dahlias, Alistair MacLean's short story that first drew her husband's attention to the author. After some gentle persuasion and the offer advance of £1,000, Ian Chapman, who had become a lifelong friend to Alistair, managed to convince the reluctant author to write a novel. Hardly surprising that MacLean turned his wartime experiences in the Royal Navy to tell the story of HMS Ulysses, based loosely on his own time on the cruiser HMS Royalist, and drawing heavily on the stories of many of the infamous Arctic convoys to Russia. He would go on to draw on his store of wartime experience with the next 2 books, The Guns of Navarone and The South by Java Head, following in the wake of the Royalist, as she moved from the Arctic waters to the Mediterranean and then Far East in the war against Japan. Arguably, these were his best books. Yet his editor at Collins, Milton Ormond, advised that he scrap South by Java Head and move away from World War II stories. William Collins, the chairman, came to the rescue by selling the film rights to Danny Angel and backed the story of the fall of Singapore. Woolman would seem to have misjudged the market at the time. War stories were very popular and sold in their millions in austerity Britain of the 1950s and 60s. Rationing did not end until 1954. Coupled with that was the painful retreat from empire in the Suez Fiasco in 1956. Readers wanted to look back to Britain's finest hour. Indeed, HMS Ulysses, published in 1955, had followed in the wake of Nicholas Monstrat's The Cruel Sea and Herman Wouk's The Caine Mutiny, both published in 1951, and both made into films. One of the all-time favourites from the era was Christopher Landon's Ice Cold in Alex, also made into a memorable film. The Guns of Navarone in 1957, and based loosely on the Dodecanese campaign in 1943, sometimes known as Churchill's Folly. Although the island of Navarone is a fictional invention by MacLean, he later wrote that there was no such island as Navarone, but there were 1 or 2 islands remarkably like it. It's a really interesting book to read. It's got some really cool pictures, and it's one of those books, again, which you probably wouldn't think to pick up. It's like this one, more than a ship's cap, Alistair MacLean's War. They are not conventional naval history books, but they are certainly worth reading and certainly very interesting for naval historians and those who like naval history to read. What is a perfect war and why is it not possible? The perfect war is the war which is clean, precise, no civilians are harmed, and all the fighting stays in a nice, safe place far away from anything where people can watch academically. And everything goes to plan. You notice the problem with that? If everything goes to plan for one side, it's probably not going to plan for the other side. And if it stays nice and neat for one side, it's probably being very nasty for the other side. And it requires both sides to be like that. Both sides to go, no, we won't go nasty. And what's your definition of nasty? Is a commando raid nasty? It's going after a military target. It's using special forces. It's a specialist trained specialists. It's not trying to make civilian targets or civilian targets or anything like that. But one side will view it as nasty, one side won't. That's the other problem with this perfect war. That's sure. Lee Child's in Jack Reacher. It's worth our reading. Honourable, I never understood why the excellent book like H. Monsieur Ulysses has never been made into a movie. Although considering the movie versus book version of The Hunt for October, I should be happy. Yeah. They're good books. So, those are the first 4 books. These are the next 4 books, which are British Escort Destroyers of the Second World War by Les Brown. Panther Medium Tank by Dennis Oliver, just so you know what I'm going to be working through. The M60 Main Battle Tank by David Grummet. And the Panzer IV by Dennis Oliver. So I'm decided that tank books are obviously written by people who have D names. And Les Brown really just is taking up so many books these days. He's just good. Dope Squad. Is bombing a factory producing items for the war effort nasty? Are the people working on it legitimate targets? It's a very interesting, disturbing area of study. Yeah, welcome to the world of why this whole concept is a lovely academic discussion, but is not really practical. Sean Quigley. Thanks to Dr. T. McLean's book just put a jump to second on my list of must-haves. Now I know who would be based leading scene who he based leading scene Peter Ralston on. Seems he pulled a Hitchcock by appearing in his own book. It makes sense. And look, are you going to consult the chieftain? I would love to consult the chieftain. We keep managing to miss in the night, float past each other. We haven't ever managed to just start chatting yet. There's the Voxo. Right now. I have no idea how long. Let's start off with the Panther IV, considering that seems to have got the most immediate response from everyone. So this is a cool book. Now, this series is mostly for those people who want to, I'll put this politely, make a good model. So I'm going to start off by pointing to the back. They have some wonderful instructions here. I have to admit, German tanks, other than the Panzer IV, have never really been my thing for making models. I like my Matildas. I have a large collection of Matildas. I once got told off because my Matilda collection appeared in a Warhammer game, but as I pointed out, at that point I had no Warhammer vehicles, and my troops were unsupported, so we had to work out an ad hoc thing for what the Matilda would have been in the Space Marines. Which caused fun, but luckily my local Warhammer, the local Warhammer place that it was then, was quite happy to accommodate these things. A horde of 16 Matilda tanks appearing. But it is a good one, and it's got some good text in it. It's got some good history. Gives you some details of 1944. It's, how do I put this? This is all for people who are trying to replicate the Normandy campaign from the summer of 1944. So it's the German army and the Waffen SS, and that's it. Melanie Sigurd, do you have any of the funnies? Some of the ones based on Matildas. I went for what can I say? When I was about 14, 15 years old, what I did to relax was build models and read history books, and occasionally try and write history books. And so, yeah, I built a lot of Matildas at that time. If you use French Char B models, they probably assumed they were Warhammer tanks. Probably would have thought they were rare ones. So, yeah, like in the American Civil War, when the first battles where the population went on picnic to watch the battle, that's always slightly disturbing for me. And this is the sort of I see it. Panzerlehr Regiment 130. This unit was formed in late 1943, in part from personnel of the Panzerlehr Aldung, a training unit of the Panzertruppenschule Wunsdorf. The regiment's was formed at the same time and commanded by Major Prince Wilhelm von Schomburg-Wolberg, who had led a battalion of Panzer Regiment 39 until February 1943. When he was badly wounded, in January 1944, the 1st Battalion of Panzer Lehr Regiment 130 was renamed 2nd Abteilung, and together with the regimental headquarters was training near Verdun in eastern France. The first shipment of 16 Panzerfaust 4 tanks had been made in late September 1943, and by February of the following year, the division reported that a total of 98 had arrived. In addition, a few Panzerfaust 4 tanks had been brought to France from Bergen, where the unit had served as a training formation. No further reinforcements were allocated before the invasion began, and those all came directly from National, the West, the Army's supply directorate in Western Europe. During the first 2 weeks of May 1944, the regiment was ordered to hand over 9 of their Panzerfaust 4 to Panzer Regiment 22 of 21st Panzer Division, and a further 6 tanks from the Signals and Panzerjäger battalions of Panzer Lehr Division were also given up. On order on the 2nd of May, instructing Panzer Artillery Regiment 130 to relinquish their Panzerfaust 4 tanks was rescinded. On the 1st of June 1944, less than a week before the Allied armies landed in Normandy, the regiment headquarters reported that 5 Panzerfaust 4 tanks were on hand, while a further 8 were with the headquarters of 2nd Abteilung. Both 5th Company and 6th Company had 21 tanks, 1 less than their authorized allocation, and 7th Company and 8th Company were at full strength with 22. You always have to remember that the Panzer IV is the main thing which does the most of the fighting for the Germans. I know the other tanks get the memories, but the Panzer IV does most of the work. It really does. Conor Cameron, I have finally managed to book a trip to London. Any recommendations for a thing to visit after Belfast? I would wander up I would wander up and see if HQS Wellington is open for lunch. That's always a nice one to go for lunch if they're open. Sometimes they're not open to the public, but sometimes they are, and you can wander in for lunch. They're very nice and very helpful in there. That's on the other side of the river in Belfast. There's the Cuddy Sark to go see. There's also the replica of the Golden Hind, which is lovely to go and look at. And basically, you can have a very nice naval-themed wander around London. And I do recommend the river taxis for going around. I often use those. Which ones are based on Matildas? Most are based on Churchill. Yeah, most of the British ones were, but the Australians had a few funnies which were based on Matilda hulls. But they're fighting. Or at least I read about them enough that I adapted some kits. So I never looked into seeing too much if there were too many actually ever used in reality, but there was enough information there I could adapt them from a Churchill kit to... And as Bandrings pointed out, a lot of prototypes of funnies were done on earlier tank types, so yeah, that helped. Panzerfaust tank? Sorry, yeah. That was my funny reasoning. funny reading. Because there was a picture of a Panzerfaust on one side, and every time I was reading Panzer, it comes coming around saying, no, stop it. National Maritime Museum of Greenwich is definitely cool. IWM Main... yeah, I would stick to the River Taxi route. IWM Main can be good, but... Come on, provincial corruption is now at 100%, and I'm at 93 stab, but all reforms are in, so it should start falling now. You hope, or they rebel. Sean, they will rebel. We'll take bets as to whether it's well. Richards, Montreal Locomotive Company leads the way. Is what I announced while charging in a Valentine tank Morton Wolf on about 6 seconds before getting one shot at it. KVG, hello, Carl. Have you? Speaking of funnies, have you ever heard of Big Wind Tank? No, I haven't. M60! Now, this is a good one. You'll like this. America's Cold War Warrior, 1959 to 1977. And a very cool vehicle. 1959 to 1997. And, yeah. They have some really interesting things in here, but I do like some of the models. It's not pretty cool. And that's the combat engineer vehicle, etc., and how you can build it is quite interesting. They have a full example of where you can get the scale kits, where you can get the modifications to put it in. They talk about apparently Black Dog's resin accessory kit and how that can be added into it. Some pretty good paint start advice in this book as well. Oh, there are many amphibious tanks I would like to discuss with the chieftain. I think he and I could have an interesting discussion about them, but we haven't, as said, we haven't ever managed to meet up and have a chat, and I would like to have a chat with him. Maybe if I get to the... I'm not sure if I'm going to get to the tank museum, tank festival fest this year, but I'm hoping to. It depends on things going on. Anyway, this is a good book. Again, it's got stuff in here which basically gives you the M60 described. So the first M60s, or Slick 60 as they became known, look very similar to the M48 and quite distinctive from the subsequent versions of the M60. The main distinguishing feature between a new tanks and its predecessor was the replacement of the M48's boat-shaped hull with a new wedge-shaped front, designed to allow the easy adoption of new armor technology. The tank was 9.309 meters long. So, by my count, now please notice, we're talking about it being 9,309 millimeters long. Really? What was stopping you make it the 0.1 millimeter longer? The sort of 1 millimeter longer to make it 9 meters 31. 9.31 meters. Who does that? Who? and this was with the gun tube pointing forward, at 3.362 meters wide, again, and 3.206 meters high. The weight was 45 tons, angled at between 45 degrees and 63 degrees. The frontal hull armor varied in the thickness from 93mm to 143mm. The side armor was between 36mm and 74mm, while the hull roof armor was 36mm and the floor 19mm at the front, decreasing to 13mm at the rear. The hull held 26 rounds of 105mm ammunition in 2 racks, either side of the driver's compartment. The drivers in the fighting compartment were served by a gas particulate filter system, which fed purified air in the event of nuclear, biological, and chemical contamination, and served as a heater for the crew compartment. The NM60 was powered by a Continental AVDS 117-SM92 V12 diesel engine, delivering 750 horsepower. The Allison CD856 transmission provided 2 forward gears and 1 reverse. On the first M60s, the tank was steered by a wheel, which was later replaced by a T-shaped steering column. The suspension consisted of torsion bars, a front idler wheel, and 6 road wheels, and a rear drive sprocket. From 1962, the hydraulic shock absorbers were fitted on the first and last road wheel stations, and 2 bumper springs, 2 at the front and 1 at the rear. The road wheels were smaller than those of the M48A2 and are construction from aluminium, with only a steel ring included for strength in an attempt to keep the tank's weight down. The tank was fitted with T97 double-pin tracks, 80 links with each side, with chevron-patterned rubber pads. This is the quality of detail this book provides. If you try to model an M60, I couldn't imagine a better book for it. Chieftain will be in Europe soon. That's cool. I'll see if me and Drac can wander along to any of those cities and meet up with them. That's a Would Meza Kabir, the loss of Hood and Bismarck be a good example of why Perfect War is blockship? There are many examples of why Perfect War is blockship. Right. The M60 late versions with the new angular turret look cool. Yeah. Dear guy, so which German tank World War II period was the most mechanic friendly? There's not a single one. There's not a single one that's mechanic friendly. Maybe the Panzer II. John quickly, Chieftain will be in Europe. Answer on. Andrew could go for 9.31 meters, or possibly shorten to 9.3 meters. All are options. All are options. Imperial to metric conversion? Potentially. I'm sure that is literally the difference of layers of paint. No, the 0.1mm is after saying more than the round number or anything. You can always tell a British tank as it's fitted with team-making facilities. Do not be upset with the brew brew box. It's useful. Keeps everyone going. Plus, it can also be used to make a pot noodle. And hot chocolate. And coffee. Fresh. Oh, that's fresh, you can ever get it. Pot noodle is is quite useful. Right then. The Panther. The second most overblown tank in the history of World War II. Most overblown being the Tiger. Okay, This is what I don't understand, because if you look at the back of this, one of the interesting things is you go to the back of these books, and normally they give you a regimental outline of how many unit vehicles per regiment. The Panther, for this period, and this is for, remember, for Eastern Front, summer 1943, isn't giving you such an outline. You turn to the front, and there it is. There is the outline. It's right at the front. Okay. Alright, so why is it at the front? The other side is back. This time it's showing you a full totalitarian or group of Panthers. What's interesting when you turn to this book is when you look for the Panthers in this one, and they do show up. Not this one, it's this one, of course. Please note what I said. This is all the way hidden at the back. At the back, we sort of go, okay. Oh, good lord. They have Panthers. They have 3 of them in the unit. All the rest are Panzer IVs. And again, they have 3 5s. All the rest are 4s. This one even has some Panzer IIIs and 4s, but no 5s. This one has Panzer IVs, but they're mostly 4s. And again here, 4s. Alright. So that's the majority of units are made up of Panzer IVs, with a few 3s and occasionally a couple of 5s thrown in. This unit, therefore, is rare, in that it is made up of, theoretically, Panzer IVs. This is on the Eastern Front. It's almost as if it's at the front to try and go, no, Panzer, the 5s were here. Okay, the 5s were here, what do they do? What did they actually achieve? What was their round of kill ratio? What was their operational ratio? How often did they break down? I do not want to read about them. Panzer Regiment 15. Originally raised in 1937, this regiment was attached to the 11th Panzer Division in September 1940 in the reorganisation that followed the French campaign. In February 1943, 1st Abteilung was used to form Panzer Abteilung 52, one of the first Panther units mentioned above. On the 19th of August 1943, the few remaining tanks of Panzer Abteilung 52 were integrated into Panzer Regiment 15 as the regiment's 1st Abteilung, and in this way returned to the 11th Panzer Division. In mid-September 1943, the battalion reported that a total of 96 Panthers were on hand, a full allocation, but that 48 of these were in either short or long-term repair. Oh, we've been doing so well. Who let them back in? Whoa. That's got the M18 tank destroyer is pretty mechanic friendly, and the transmission engine on rollers that could allow it to be removed and replaced relatively easy. That is good. See me do it, boiling vessel. So a tank that is comfy and can cook for the crew and has good sights and radio and quick escape routes is a good tank. Armor, firepower, and speed matter less than those factors. Then tanks got killed getting stonked by mortars when getting out for a quick brew would be my guess. That did affect some things. I know both Tiger and Panther were rushed into service and suffered multiple mechanical breakdowns. Also, the fact that they went for the super tank rather than giving themselves an improved war. Theoretically, that unit is lining the side of the road, 10 to 25 commanders from railhead with broken transmissions. Yep. It's become sort of mean that all British ships had team-making facilities instead of guns. Tanks instead of, well, the tanks definitely had team-making facilities. The British ships had shit that had lots of facilities on them for making tea, but I think most ships tend to have those facilities. One thing about this book I will say is it has good maps, and it's well written. This is the thing, I like to review these books because I like to see them because I think it's quite good that someone like me reviews them, because I'm not a fan of the Panther. I don't necessarily think it's the greatest tank of all time, but I think this is a well-written book, and for those who are interested, it's a good thing for them. So I'd recommend this book if you're interested in the Panther. Yeah. You'd think that someone would work out that they could stop those. And those particular lovely people from commenting. Right then, last book. British Escort Destroyers of the Second World War by Lewis Brown. Now, for those of you who like the Hunt class, you'll love this book. For those who want to look at some of the Town class, you'll enjoy this book as well. And those who like the VNW and the S-Class conversions, you're going to really love this book. But honestly, I would say the stars of this book are the Hunt class in my mind, and I am a great fan of the Hunt class. I really am. This is one of those books which gives you a really interesting history, but also gives you a list of the various models for sale. And that's what I like about these books, because I have been hunting and trying to make my mind up for a decent Hunt class model for a while. And this shows you all the various models out there and what they offer. And it's quite interesting, the various options out there. Mm-hmm. There's some card models out there of that, but also what I really loved was there's a Dean's Marine 1:96 scale. And this is the write-up of it. Intended primarily for radio control operation, a plated fiberglass hull forms the base of this model. Decks and superstructure are in 1mm laser cut plastic sheet, with a 0.5mm sheet for the two main structures. Over 150 cast metal and cast plastics items, along with vacuum forming for all gun shields, gun cabs, ships, boats, and provided. An etched brass sheet containing the stanchions is included, and the kit is completed with all running hardware, i.e. prop tubes, prop shafts in stainless steel, rudder, tiller arm. The instructions are supported on a CD showing various stages of the construction. And that's a really interesting option. There's also a 1 to 200 card type of a Hunt Type 2, scale card type by GPM. As you can imagine, there are many versions of Campbelltown. Many, many versions. There's some good Polish companies that are producing some very good ships. I think JSC and Mirage Hobby are the examples they give here. Airfix do a 1-600. It was first released in 1961. Oh, no. That's Campbelltown. Airfix never produced a model of the Hunt class, but the January and February 1971 issues of Airfix magazine contained an article by Peter Hodges describing how to model one using the hull of HMS Hotspur and adapting bits from other Airfix kits with some scratch building. Yeah, that's not really my style. I'm not going to do that for a ship. I'd like to have a proper model to build with on this ship. I don't mind scratch building for my tanks, but my ships, I want them to be... I'm going to put it so I get more fussy over my ships. But this is a good... This is an interesting thing, and it's an interesting book. As we all know, I'm quite a big fan of the Hunt class. And I'm quite disappointed that none of them survived World War... none of them sort of survived to this day. It's rather sad. Sorry, I don't remember it. New York Bible 72. Is it possible to lend you books to review? The thing about being loaned a book to review it, and this is why I don't tend to, is because if you're lent a book and then you pan the book, people don't tend to be too happy with you. So I tend to, this is why I get to stick with things that go, if you send me a book, it's sent to me, and it's mine, I can review it and be on it completely honest. If it's going back to someone, I don't want them thinking, I don't want them having back from me going, you sent me a book, I sent you this book which I love, and then you panned it or something like that. So, no, as a rule, I don't take loan books to review. There are many a phenomena that affected like 21 frigates. But they weren't that bad either. They were a sensible design for they were, but they weren't really designed for the roles they found themselves doing. Vision, how do RN escort destroyers differ from US destroyer escorts? I would say the RN's escort destroyers, the Hunt class, are designed more for the escort. The US escort destroyers basically are the British equivalent of almost a light fleet destroyer. Whereas, yeah, it gets interesting. There's a few sort of subtle differences. And honestly, if I was going to be tossed around in the North Atlantic, I'd probably prefer to be on the Hunt class. Does the Panther book go into the problems caused by resource shortages, and that a fair number of Panthers ended up being built out of soft steel because of the alloy shortages? It does cover a fair bit of stuff. I would say the Sherman's probably more influential than the T-34. And this is because that the T-34, as lovely as it is, has so many issues in its engineering. I wish people were more listening about the show. I think today, though, the trouble is we got so obsessed with the Panther and the Tiger and to extent the T-34, we've forgotten the lesson of the Sherman, which was, yeah, that we can outproduce you all. Basically, the point about the Sherman was that the Russian answer is always, if you want to have the best thing to beat a tank is a better tank. The Sherman answer was the best thing to beat a tank is 6 other tanks. Because you'll get 2 of them, but the remaining 4 will get you. Now, Sharon, am I right to think that replacing Hood's engines would require opening up the ship to get them out? I can't think of any scenario where you don't end up having to open up a ship to remove its engines. Yes, you would have to open up the ship, but that's what you have to do when you're going to replace engines, whatever you can do. And this is something which is considered quite strange today, but even to this day, we open up ships to change engines. At the moment, there's pictures going around of HMS Daring, I think, with her side cut open to have the new power packs put in and out. What I love is the actual modifications they're doing are pretty much the original design as my dad put forward for the Type 45s. So, Dad, if you're watching from up there, you are right, and you get the crow. Probably you are at the moment. Please don't crow too much in the direction of Peter. He might kick you out. He has the gate. He's the gate, apparently. At least that's what I was told by my by the priests Marys. Yes. Before anyone wants to read that, I went to a Catholic university for my bachelor's. I went to St Mary's University College in Twickenham, where I was one of the Church of England Protestants there, where I did my bachelor's, and the priest was a lovely gentleman, a really interesting person to chat with, and many fun conversations, and a couple of games of chess. As I've seen, JSC is most known on the West, but there are more companies on it. There is a 1 to 200 Canton payment model from G4M, GPM, for example. Probably others to find as well. Vision. Pershing was needed because the Sherman had problems dealing with later German tanks. T-34 had the gun, armour, and ease of maintenance and production, so I give it to the T-34. So I guess no one told Vespa to design the T-21s for Vosper? Design T-21 for worse weather conditions than they could face? No, because the T-21s were designed off-spec by Vosper as basically a light frigate, which was supposed to fill in for numbers. And the whole idea, it was supposed to free up ships, the more bigger and better ships, to do other jobs, while that they were having a shortage. It was basically the Royal Navy going, we need to design that's going to fill in, maintain numbers. Imagine that, a Navy worried about maintaining numbers and maintaining hulls, and accepting a slightly less capable design so as a short-term stopgap to fill in numbers before the Type 22 numbers came in. That was the whole plan. So basically, it was allow them to keep up their serviceability of numbers available while they waited for the Type 22s to come into service. And for that, they're perfectly good. There's a nice debate going on over tanks here. The Merkava is a good niche tank. M10s and M18 tank destroyers fought alongside Shermans, yes. And that's the other thing. You have to remember, the Sherman was part of a whole force. So they're producing them in numbers, and yeah, you go, all right, oh, yeah, the King Tiger, that's going to wipe out the Sherman, but there's also the Sherman Firefly. And, oh, look, here comes the M10s and the M18s. Oh, fudging frigate. Fudgical frigating. Now the Tiger's for it. Or, even more likely, Here comes the Typhoon, or the Mustang, or any of the other various aircraft carrying anti-tank rockets coming and wandering around and causing trouble for the Germans. That was the point. I mean, Sage, the voting selection books tonight with civilized banter made for grading. We'll say thank you and good night. Take care. Enjoy, Sage. It is 10 o'clock, so I am probably going to say I'll carry on for about another 10 minutes till we've done 3.5 hours, but then I will probably go off myself. I don't know, if the British have to change HMS Invincible's engines, I'll say, yeah, only the Brit RN could pull that off. I don't think any. Well, everyone's pulled off doing an engine change at sea. Doing a complete refit at sea at some point. Everyone's had to at some point. So yeah, but I think in the engine reconditioning and rebuild was Invincible's going south in the Falklands War, and yeah, it's fun times. Richards, what I was on about was it was the first of slope war armor. No. There were other vehicles which had sloped armor before then. They were still there. Lots of different nations were experimenting with it. It's actually implementing it. First for an endurance it could achieve. Sort of. First for a good enough gun. Well, let's be honest, in 1939, the 40mm was a good enough gun. Because everything was not only capable of taking the 40mm, so that's one of the interesting things you have. That's some of the things. It starts off at the beginning of World War II, 40mm is a good enough gun. By the end of World War II, if you're designing for anything less than a 90mm, you are mucked up. That's how fast things change. Jack Wright, people win wars. Tanks are tools. Tanks don't win wars. No, but they are pretty. I think the Russians maintained some T-34s, but they're not really active. They're maintained for ceremonial, but they bought them from the last country which had them running into active service. I think they had to buy them by a considerable amount of money and giving them replacement tanks, from memory. Thanks, IQB442. I might well make an exception if after seeing the books. It might be after Canada, though, because please don't take this wrong way, but I have coming up in pretty much so close it's getting scary. 2 weeks' time. In a week's time, I go off on what I'm calling man of honor duties. So whilst I'm doing lives, etc., I'm not doing any recording, I'm hoping to have all my recordings done before that week. And then I go off to Canada. Yeah, it's that close. It's that close. It's quite scary for me. It's that close. Been planning for it for so long. So many emails gone backwards. So many things going backwards and forwards. And yeah, it's that close. Bad news. Pop spikes are still happening. Have heard a few, with the first being right after I answered your question, but before you got to read it. Dang, that's annoying. I wonder what's causing them. I did turn down the gain for you. The gain is now at the lowest point it can be, so hopefully that works. And Freeman, more likely, here comes the tactical aviation blowing up the fuel supply and other logistics, meaning the Panther Tiger can't actually move, but run out of ammo and the gearbox just got fired. Yeah, that happens. Richards, I like to cry myself. It's my tank in War Thunder, but lots so fun and speed for armor. Can't kill what you can't hit. Does work. Take a look at your Discord personal messages, please. I will look at the Discord DMs at some point. At the moment, I've been just so... I'm being terrible over communication. I am just recording so many. I've got 4 videos written up to record tomorrow whilst also teaching. I'm currently at the point where I have... Let's see if I just check it. And this is a sort of heads up to you all what's sort of we've got loaded up. Going to my studio. High CPU usage detected. Yes, I know. I've got that. I've got to make a £1,000 order on Amazon at some point before I go and make sure I get everything right through. That's scaring me. £1,000. I said I've got the money. I'm just not doing it because of the. As I've explained already many times. I don't need to keep going through that. So, I've got the videos for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 13th all loaded up. And there is literally, if I go to my list, there is a video a day coming out, and they're all being recorded before I... So I've got another 8 videos to record before I go. Before the end of this week. Wish me luck, basically. So the gain is not for the pop spikes, just helps when clipping when you get excited. Oh, I was hoping it would affect the pops and spikes as well. Let's see. Hi, Carl Harmon. Just finished my first scouts problem planning the future. Cool. That sounds about right. Think, but don't quote me. Chieftain put us paid to the idea TAC air directly knock down most tanks out with research of the last few years. Most tactical air, what it tends to do is not, especially in the World War II, is it doesn't necessarily knock out tanks. It knocks out the supplies, but also it sometimes hits and takes out the tracks. And that's the thing. If you can take out the tracks on a vehicle, it's immobilized. And they have to fix the tracks. And in a fast-moving campaign, as you often had in World War II, without supplies, without the tracks go down, you've lost it. It's basically a mission kill the tank. And that can stop an attack. And that can leave you open to a counter-attack, in which case you don't get that tank repaired before you've lost your position. Wish I wasn't there broke. I could bring my dad and meet you at the Roadblock. He was on the US Oklahoma City. That would be really cool. But yeah, I understand that. Trust me. As an academic, I have spent most of my life being dead broke at certain points. Pretty much every summer. The joy of university pay. You don't get contract lecturers don't get paid in the summer when you're not teaching. But I usually find other work. What sort of cable does it use? It uses the cable it came with, which I can sort of show you. It's got a bit of a cloth covering. It seems okay, broadly speaking. But, yeah, I will work on it. It's something, let's put it this way, it's something I will think about, and I will try and do even more work on when I get back from Canada. It'll be another thing there. And it's also, I think, I do sometimes wonder if the popping is something to do with the fact that it's all run through a laptop. And the poor laptop is currently going, ah! But again, I'll deal with that after I get back from Canada. Has happened. I'm still alive. The car didn't fool me, even though I had to hammer the only rims off due to the lack of anti-seizure. Good. That sounds fun. And Jerry Paul, I have a long discussion. Are there any good books about the role of the four funnel liners in World War II? What was? Don't have to ask me that. There is actually a good book out there. A good book I only reviewed only a couple of weeks ago. Oh, no. Not that one. Ba-da-da-ba-ding. Right. Check I'm tucked in at the back, so I don't flash you anything or anything. Let's see. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, not those books, not that one. Are they? Okay, don't go book coder. No. Running. Okay, it's not this book, but this book has a counterpart. This is Cargo Liners Under Fire, 1939 to 1945. Not the Four Stackers, but there is a counterpart to this book, which is all about the Four Stackers, which I can't find at the moment, but is around somewhere. So basically, if you look up this book, usually Amazon then recommends the other one as well. And this is by Bernard Edwards. Ugh, I need to go back to the gym. I'm spending so much time sitting on my bum recording videos that I'm getting flat again. Ay, caramba. The ends, how does it terminate? How does it terminate? USB, XLR, something else? USB in the laptop. Excuse me a second. Quiet now, probably. This, for this end. Although, apparently, not gone quiet. So it's obviously changed to something else. Pick up the sound. So let me check the sound. It's back to the right thing. Went to default microphone, which is always annoying. I don't want that on. I don't want that on. I don't want that on. So that should make it all better. And then I go to... Keeps going back to a default microphone which doesn't exist. Da-da-lee-dee. Da-da-lee-dee. Ah, well. So, hopefully that's still working. Hopefully, he says. And yeah, hopefully that's better. I'm not sure what it's done sound-wise because it's gone to a default microphone, which... Vision, do UAD worth standing? Get a standing desk. No, I like my wooden desk. It's been with me for a long, long time. But this is not like the device settings transition. It does not like that. It's currently crying on me. Richards, never lost audio and sounds fine here. I have an idea. I have no idea what's going on, but hey ho. Anyway. Ba-da-ding. Ba-da-da-dum. High CPU usage. That's all good wanting to have. The Ghost mic. None of these laptops have built-in microphones, so perhaps it's decided to go back to... Because I had it set up and working well. Perhaps... Oh, has it updated today? That could be why. It's updated. It's gone back to default microphone rather than using the Razer Siren Elite, which I had edited things on. So that might explain why it's not going. It's going weird. Yay! Anyway, right, I will sort that all out after this is all over. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this evening, and thank you very much for watching. Yeah. Oy. As said, I'm going to be doing some many sit-ups and press-ups. Updates have been done on XSplit. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Vision, sorry to hear your old cat pass away in early COVID in March. But you've got other kitties. That's good. I always think that the best homage you can do and the sort of best way you can honour an animal is if you get another one. If you're holding a life is they know it never feels the same whole. It's always different, and it's a different relate. They are a member of the family, but it is kind of a case of I have there needs to be a doggy member of the family in my family. Oh, not again! I thought I got rid of you. Let's check this round. Okay, thanks, Dan, for deleting them. It was hidden, thank you. Right, thank you very much, Sharon. Would it also explain why your game changes never actually changed the audio levels? That would certainly explain it, wouldn't it? Oh, well, I'll sort that out later. Thank you very much, everyone, and take care. Hope you have fun. Hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I'll sort out the audio. Fun times. Oh well. Take care, everyone. Cheers. Hope you have a good trip. And if Haida should come up missing during your trip, just send the police my way. Honest, I've seen Dracula sitting right here the entire time. Thank you, Sean. We will certainly do that. Thank you, Bijon. Thank you, Darius Ralston. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Dub Squad. Thank you, Sean Stafford and Dan for adminning. Thank you, Richards. Thank you, George Newman. Thank you, Vision. Thank you all the subscribers and all the people who've joined the channel. Thank you everyone who's done a super chat tonight, and thank you to everyone who does super thanks on the videos. It was quite weird getting the first one of those. It was quite cool. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Although I don't know if it seemed to disappear. It came through and then it disappeared. So I don't know if someone withdrew it, or they did it and then they withdrew it, or what the hell. But I got a notification. I went, ooh, cool. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care, everyone. And yeah, I'm gonna go. Apparently, now I've tried to go to settings to sort out the sound stuff. It now won't let me do the usual thing I flash up at the end. So you're gonna have to see me going like this. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Take care, and bye-bye. Have fun. Bye. Notification of what? I got a notification of a super thanks and then it disappeared. So super thanks is basically the equivalent of a super chat, but it's done on a recorded video. So you can do a super thanks like you can do a super chat on a live. You can do a super thanks on a recorded video. It's interesting. Take care, on. Have fun and thank you. Thank you very much, Ron. And I'm gonna, as it's gonna see me the whole way through going for it, I'm gonna go out going. These two. Waiting till it appears. There you go. Thank you, Aaron. Take care and have fun.